held in public, it is not a public meeting. There is no fire drill planned, so if the fire alarm sounds, please leave by the exit nearest to the large screen in front of the room and proceed down the fire exit to the courtyard. Once it is safe to return, councillors will receive a text message. Officers will also advise when it is safe to return to the meeting. We are recording the meeting this evening using our webcasting system. The webcast will be transmitted live and will also be available on the Council's website following the meeting. All mobile devices should be switched off or set to silent so the meeting is not interrupted by ringtones. Okay, so welcome everybody. Before we begin anything, I would just like to make note of the recent sad news about our King. I'd like to wish our King a speedy recovery. He will be in our thoughts and prayers over the coming months, but I look forward to hearing the good news of his recovery soon. So item number 1 is apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chairman. Apology for absence from Councillor Kirkman with Councillor Harrison as substitute. Thank you.
Welcome, Councillor Harrison. Item number 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay, so I'll hand over to Councillor Smith.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a member of Essex County Council, because I get the privilege of getting rid of this waste and soon to be burning it a pitsy.
I mean, over my dead body comes to mind, but anyway, thank you for that, Councillor Smith, and Councillor McGeorge.
Thank you. This is just sort of for the sake of full openness and transparency. I don't have an interest to declare, which has been confirmed by the monitoring officer. However, Plan B, who have prepared the report in enclosure number 3, do work in connection with my work with waste disposal, and we actually dispose of waste from the tip sites that they manage. So it's just to make sure that I'm clear.
Thank you, Councillor McGeorge, and that will have been noted. Okay, so let's move on to item number 3, which is the minutes. So I could do with a confirmation that the minutes of the meeting of the Place Scrutiny Committee held on 7th of November 2023. All those that agree that it is in order and correct, could you raise your hands now? And all those abstaining? Thank you very much. Okay, so that's the minutes. So that brings us nicely on to item number 4, and this is the petition about the weekly black bin collection. So the council received the following e-petition, which ran from 09/11/2023 to 08/01/2024 on the council's website and received 2,606 signatures. In accordance with the council's petition scheme, petitions containing 1,000 or more signatures will be referred to the appropriate cabinet member and council officers, and the cabinet member will refer to the matter to the relevant scrutiny committee, who will consider the matter and advise the cabinet member on which action they wish to take. Therefore, the following petition has been referred by the cabinet member for environment, carbon reduction and waste enforcement to the Place Scrutiny Committee for consideration. So there's 2 aspects to this. Obviously, there's the petition itself, but also the member of the public who raised it has also had a statement prepared. So what we're going to do is I will read out the actual petition itself, and then the statement from the member of the public will be read out by my council officer. So the actual petition itself states the following: revert back to the black bin general non-recycled rubbish weekly collection instead of the proposed fortnightly collection. And then underneath that it says Basildon Council new waste collections are to change in November from a weekly black sacks to a fortnightly black bins collections. The black bin is a welcome addition. However, to decrease from weekly to fortnightly will have a detrimental effect to residents and possibly cause environmental issues and fly tipping. So that is the full text of the petition. And now the member of the public, who unfortunately can't be with us tonight, has sent us in a statement which will now be read aloud by our council officer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I would like to thank you all for allowing our statement to be read out today and for taking the time to discuss the issues and concerns that we, your constituents, are currently experiencing. We were amazed by the level of response this petition received and to be, what I believe, either the only one or one of a very few to have exceeded the threshold that allowed this. It clearly shows the strong feeling among residents who are opposed to the recent waste management changes. In our view, we appear to be receiving a gradual, stealthily decline of services, with black bag collections going from weekly to twice monthly, garden waste now a service with additional charge, and the implementation of sorting our own recyclables into separate canvas bags. Yet our council tax increases year on year, and despite your manifesto statement in May 2021 detailing your promise not to implement such measures and to retain weekly collections. We are all very aware it is in everyone's interest to recycle more. However, the new bags and reduced non-recyclable waste collection approach is not only fundamentally flawed, but destined to fail. For example, 1. The canvas bags cannot withstand the smallest of gusts and very often blow away. 2. The black bin and canvas bags are too small for most households to effectively achieve what is being asked. 3. The storage of all the receptacles is challenging or near impossible for most, and therefore are left outside and often soiled by either the elements and or local wildlife. 4. The reduced collection of non-recyclable waste is causing hazardous and unsanitary conditions for households and the surrounding areas. 5. The increased incidence of fly tipping, the extra workforce required, and the costs incurred when clearing fly-tipped waste. 6. The feedback from rubbish collection teams have been it takes significantly longer to complete rounds, often roads are missed and require later additional collections. So we wonder, is the council's objective to save money? With no longer sorting recyclables their end versus the need to hire more resources to meet additional demand, assuming additional hiring was required, plus extra or adaptations to existing lorries, because for the council, cost-wise, it surely doesn't balance out. Neither does it stack from an environmental sustainability standpoint, which you have been pushing as the premise for this change. With additional refuse trucks, increased fly tipping clearance teams, and additional car visits to Pitsea Refuse Centre, the CO2 emissions must have increased rather than decreased. You cannot be happy with how this has ended up. We, the residents, the constituents, many of whom elected you to your position, are definitely not happy. We would like to ask for a complete and transparent review of the current situation and suggest the following changes. 1. Collections of non-recyclable waste return to weekly collections. 2. Allow those of larger household occupancies to order an additional black bin. 3. To completely redesign the canvas bags to have a more secure fastening, sturdier structure, and either vary in size or allocate additional bags to meet the needs of individual households. 4. To either cancel or continue the reduced cost of green waste collections. 5. To reduce the cost of special item collections or re-implement a twice-monthly crusher collection service across the borough. 6. To reinstate the communal recycling bins into council supermarket car parks to allow residents to dispose of excess recycling at their own choosing. 7. For our own Basildon councillors to forward the idea within government that additional cardboard, plastic and paper waste be stopped at source, i.e. the manufacturer. This would vastly reduce the unwanted waste households are required to dispose of themselves and through no fault of their own on a weekly basis. I would like to thank you all for your time to listen to our concerns and hope that some changes and or adaptations can be made to the current regime. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Officer. Okay, so before I move to the Cabinet Member for Waste, I would like to point out that that is the statement from the resident who raised the petition, but much of the stuff raised on there is actually far beyond the scope of the petition and what tonight's debate is about, or discussion debate is about. We are looking at the black bins, their change from a weekly to fortnightly collection, and then the impact outlined in the petition, such as fly tipping and detrimental effects to the environment. I'm conscious that this discussion could easily stray into other areas of waste, and while they may be valid concerns that should be raised or discussed, the focus tonight is just on those particular aspects of the item. Now, I'm not going to shut anybody down for discussing, well, you know, it's freedom of speech and all that, and I want people to be able to say what they like to say, but in terms of what I'll instruct council officers to address and respond to will be around the substantive in the petition. We can't say from this petition that, for example, residents want to discuss a whole other thing that's not necessarily put here. So just to be absolutely clear, that's what we'll be discussing, and that's what council officers will be addressing only. Like I say though, freedom of speech. So if you've got something you want to say, by all means do say it. Whether or not we will continue that on in the meeting is another question if it's not related to the petition. So please keep it on task. Thank you, everybody. I'd now like to ask Councillor Blake to make an opening statement before we start taking questions from the committee and the public on this item.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll keep this short and sweet and to the point of the petition. The return to a weekly collection will cost in the region of £2.8 to £4 million. And obviously you then got the cost of the environment for having the extra vehicles that have then got to go out weekly rather than fortnightly. So there's a cost of the environment there. We will are looking into at the moment of relaxing the criteria on the second bin to assist people on that. But just to give you a couple of facts, whilst as soon as basically just before we introduced the black wheelie bin, we had about 2,300 people ask for new food waste bins. You might see why is that relevant, because what we believe is what's been happening. People have been putting their food waste into the black sacks and whatnot and being left on the street corners. Well, that's no longer the case. There's accountability there. And for that reason, our food waste has gone up by about 35%. Relating to the environment for the residual waste, we are looking at a reduction of 23% already. So that's my justification for saying it. There have been problems. We accept that there have been problems, but relating to the actual wheelie bins, a lot of people are fully supportive of it. But we will be relaxing the criteria. I think that is an important issue because there have been quite a lot of people who have been happy with that. But we are looking at relaxing that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Oh, there we go. Straight in. Sorry? Well, I suppose it can be either. Ideally questions, though. I'd quite like to start asking council officers questions. Do you have a statement, councillor? Okay, fine. Right, well, fastest finger first. In this case, I'm going to allow Councillor Smith to ask the first. It's a question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Well, as we say, never mind, we don't go to a gunfight with a penknife, and you must be quick off the draw. This relates to a question raised by the petitioner's statement, where it's made issues about the contamination of the sacks for recycling. I tabled a motion, which was referred to the Cabinet member, to purchase blue and white disposable sacks for people with immunocompromised or disabled, and to commission a health impact assessment. I was told at the meeting there was no need for an health impact assessment because no one else has bothered. Since this meeting, is it possible I could have an update, because that ties into the points raised by the petitioner's statement?
Okay, while maybe a valid point there, I think actually that's beyond the scope for now. However, I can absolutely have someone get back to you on that particular matter. I would like to, sorry, Councillor Smith, but I'd like to focus on the substantive here, which is to do with weekly or fortnightly collections of bins and their impact. Very important point, and what I would say to you as well, Councillor Smith, is later on in the meeting there will be another point where you could raise that point again. So perhaps at that point there, item 7, the Q3 overview report for the place theme, might be a better time to perhaps mention that. For now, however, sorry, that's some people that has Councillor Child.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. The service isn't perfect. I would like to know what you are going to achieve a better quality of service. What you're going to do to achieve a better quality of service.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your question, Councillor. So I think that what we found since rolling it out is it's there. With any change, this is a massive change, and we've expected a lot of change from residents as well, and that includes things like, rather than dumping things at the end of an alleyway and the council coming along and clearing it up, we're expecting more individual ownership of waste and recycling. We're also expecting our residents to provide quality, which they have been doing. The level of contamination dropped overnight when the new service was brought in. So in terms of improving the processes and the procedures, we've assembled a bit of a working group around, particularly focused on miscollections in the areas of complaint, so we can learn from that and improve. I'm pleased to say that the direction of travel for miscollections is reducing. We are putting some extra effort into making sure that when things are reported to us, not only is the numbers being going in the right direction, but also the quality of what we're resolving and the time we're taking to respond to those issues is dropping as well. So we've put a bit of a work group together around reducing with both of those aims, so making sure we get it right first time. I think our failure rate is 0.28% or something, so it is small, but nonetheless it's important to make sure that we get it right. We're improving that direction of travel, making sure that number reduces further, but also when we do get it wrong, and if there is a property that we miss, that we're resolving it in a timely manner. So that's what we're focusing our efforts on now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any more questions? Councillor McGeorge.
Didn't think I wouldn't have a list of questions, did you? So, following on from the statement that's been read out, I've got a couple of things. So, it's our policy to try and keep the weekly waste collections. It was your policy to keep the weekly waste collections. My goodness, I can't speak. Now, asking questions, what was the line of thinking to go to the fortnightly collections with the new sacks rather than sticking to the weekly collections with the new sacks? That's my first question. Do you want me to do one at a time or keep going? Right. Secondly, have we got any figures on how many fly tips we're having to go to that we know are the domestic wastes, rather? Because obviously I know that there is fly tipping, which is the builders and everything. Do we have figures on how many we're having to go out where people are just abandoning their sacks because they didn't have room or whatever their reasoning is? And is there any work? I know the policy is going to be updated to allow the second bins to be more easily accessible. But are we also looking at your bin lids open by 2 inches, we're not going to pick it up? Because that's a big bugbear that residents have. My bin lid doesn't close literally by 1 inch and the binmen have left it because they say we're on camera, we can't pick it up. So could I have answers to those, please?
The rationale behind it in initially to go to fortnightly wasn't all about the cost savings. There is a cost saving, as we know, but it's the environment impact as well. And I think I've already read out that we were 23% down on stuff going to landfill, and an increase on our actual quality of recycling. So that alone is a good enough cause to go down to the fortnightly. And I think a lot of people have, certainly that I've spoken to, have said that they didn't realise so much stuff that actually couldn't be recycled. I think that's been an issue as well. But as I gave you a classic example earlier, the food waste where people were just putting it in their black bags was through the roof. Then now there's accountability with these bins. That's not happening. So that's another good reason. And I do hear. With all these pink and regarding the black bags and pink bags that are dumped, that is what they are. They're dumped. What people are learning, and I do believe that they are learning, whereas in the past they put it there, they wasn't necessarily dumping it there because it used to get collected weekly, so therefore they didn't class it as dumping. They're now starting to realise that is dumping. And I can give you a classic example, and I'm happy to do this. Anyone knows I live on the Charlton estate in Walthams. I can tell you now categorically for 11 years I've been there, January the 17th, and up until 4 weeks ago, without fail, on my street corner, there was loads of pink and black sacks out on the Thursday night when it's a Friday collection, but when it shouldn't be. I can tell you for the last 4 weeks, since we've had this new system, there has not been one pink or black bag outside there, and that's on the Charlton estate. So it is working. On your point of if the bin is open 1 inch or 2 inches, I have some sympathy with that. However, you still got to think of our staff. I would just like to say, and I'm sure they do, they use common sense when it comes to that, and sometimes some of them will do, some of them won't do, and maybe we can educate them a little bit more on that, so maybe. But other than that, I hope that answers your questions.
Thank you. Councillor Wingfield.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to address the committee. Can you, to officers please, can you provide any concrete evidence that the shift to fortnightly non-recyclable collections has resulted in any tangible environmental improvements? Because you've stated that we've seen a 23% drop in residual waste. But I'm presuming that that is a reduction in the waste that is being collected as part of the regular collections. But we know that we've seen an increase in fly tipping of waste. So basically, what I'm saying is, has the residual waste actually reduced, or are we undercounting it by only we're seeing a reduction in what we're collecting, which is to be expected because we've kind of put a cap on what we will collect these days.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. So the numbers that we've presented tonight, and they are indicative numbers for January, they are early doors numbers. But what we've done is compare that with last year, and that includes all waste that we collect. So in December, we undertook a couple of amnesties across the borough where we cleared any mispresented waste. We've obviously got teams going around and doing that currently as well. So that includes all of the waste we collect that goes to landfill, includes the waste that we pick up for our cleansing team. So anything that we clear off the street, so it's anything that's mispresented or not in a bin as well, is included within that figure. So I think it shows that over the first 2 months that residents are really starting to change their behaviours around restricting the amount of waste that they're producing and making sure they're recycling it.
Okay, thank you for that. What I can there is a certain amount of waste I can tell you that won't be included in that figure. Number of my residents, as you know, as I've contacted you on a number of occasions on this, number of my residents have requested additional containers, and I'm glad that you're reviewing that. But what's happening with a lot of residents is those who are producing excess waste are not able to get rid of it, and what's happening is it's stockpiling at their address. They just can't shift it quick enough. So I'm not entirely convinced that the amount of waste that's being produced is reducing, because I think there's a lot of it that we haven't collected yet. So I'm glad to hear that we are looking at relaxing the rules and getting additional containers, because I think that will make that a lot easier for those residents. But there's no getting around the fact we have seen an increase in fly tipping of domestic waste. Was that foreseen when we implemented the plan? If it wasn't, why not? Because certainly I had many residents contact me before the implementation of the plan saying that's what they presumed would happen. And if it was foreseen, why did we not put actions in place to tackle that? It took us some time to kind of get up and running with addressing it. Thank you.
Happy to answer that question. So I think that our recycling officers, now we've moved through the initial phase post rollout, and the recycling officers are doing a lot of snagging and talking to residents and going out and delivering containers and so on. Now we're through that phase, we're finding that we're getting more requests from residents, such as you say, who are doing more things like waste audits and going out and helping with the education and support and providing the additional capacity where required. Talking to the recycling officers this week, there's been a few houses that we've been out to and looked at residents, and we've gone through all the contents of the residual waste bins, and they are still not recycling, but then there are a couple we've gone to where they are recycling everything and they genuinely need that additional capacity. So those are the people we are supporting. But what we have had is a number of people where we've gone out, we've looked at the bins, and they're making no effort to recycle food waste. They're making no effort to recycle. So obviously, in those instances, we've offered the education part of that. I think if we wind our clock back to when this started, and it did start at a time of the year, in the run up to Christmas, where people do produce more waste. It was that was the time of the year that this service was introduced and rolled out. I think that the focus has been for us around, and I'm going to paraphrase the Cabinet member here, it's been about education, and then enforcement. So we made sure that we did a lot of education in the run-up to the service change. We did a lot of roadshows, a lot of communications, a lot of things on social media, we've been out to schools, coffee mornings, sheltered housing, sheltered accommodation schemes. We've been wherever anybody would have us, parish councils, village councils, to advise people of what was coming. We then, obviously, with the changes in service requiring a change in behaviour and habit from residents, what we expected some of this would happen, but where it would happen, we didn't know exactly where that would be. So some of the pockets have surprised us, some of the pockets haven't surprised us, but that means that we're then able to target the further education and enforcement where necessary. And I've got some positive numbers back from enforcement officers who've been targeting their efforts over the last couple of weeks on the ground. The majority of their conversations are educational. So the majority of their conversations are around making sure they're making the most of the containers that are available to them and the services that are available to them, but they are enforcing where the fly tipping is criminal and blatant and in complete disregard of what the majority of residents are doing in their areas. So I think that's worth bearing in mind, that those officers are on the ground. What I'm finding as I spend time on the borough, what my crews are finding, is that it is pockets and that we need to target our efforts in, rather than whole areas. And what, like I said, we expected some of this, but what we know now is where that's being reported through to us, where we want to target our officers, where we want to target our resources on the ground to make sure that we're in the right place to do that education and then the enforcement piece where necessary and as a last resort. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Just on that topic of unforeseen circumstances, one aspect that certainly wouldn't have been unforeseen was that over the Christmas period, pretty much all residents are going to make more waste. You know, you've got more people entertaining, you know, and so on. We should have really seen that coming. And we still had the same rules in place over the Christmas period about we'll only collect the one black bin that we have throughout the rest of the year. I feel that that's a little unfair, given that we know that people are likely to make more waste at Christmas. What can be done in years going forward, assuming that we maintain this scheme, that over the Christmas period or periods where we foresee there's going to be excess waste produced, we maybe relax the rules slightly, okay, to allow for those festive periods.
Thank you, Councillor. So I think that the key thing to feedback is that we will take on board feedback from tonight, and we'll build that into discussions with the Cabinet member moving forward around how we may want to consider. We've just been through the first Christmas with the new service. I think we'll take those discussions away and as feedback from the committee tonight, and see how we may take them forward in the future.
I think in some general responses to your points, Councillor, and thank you for those, we've got to remember what we did from the 27th of November to today is a massive change. Yes, we had put plans in place for what we thought might happen and resources to do that. Resource isn't always guaranteed. It only takes a driver to go off sick, and we haven't got another driver that you've lost a truck going out there. But that's the day-to-day operation that we have before the 27th as to now. Now, we can't collect black sacks on the floor the same as we collect from a black wheelie bin. We cannot safely take a black bag and throw it in the back of a truck that's only designed to take wheelie bins. So that does require a different kind of vehicle and a different crew to come round and collect those. The dilemma also is when we're changing services, if we're going round straight after normal collection and collect up that has been dumped by residents, we're unlikely to change their behaviour because we're just going to pick it up anyway. So it's a balance of where the new places were that we were going to find dumping, the amount. Yeah, I think we could all, and the Cabinet member is very clear on it, we did not really want to do it on the 27th of November as the start date, We wanted to do it 2 months earlier, but problem with procurement meant we had to go late. But we have moved significantly on from that, and we know that from the services that we have now wrapped around that, particularly around cleansing, hitting into each area the day after collection, which is starting to make the borough look far better, and we will continue to improve that. But it has been a massive task to get to the place where we've got now, and some areas have massively improved, and I know because we've been round and looked at it. So it is pockets, it is not the whole borough, and that is very clear, certainly from me spending my time driving around to see what it's like. And I know from going round that there are pockets, we will work on them. Education and enforcement is now happening, and we will get this right.
All right, very last one, Councillor.
Very last comment, and it is a comment, so I don't really expect a response. But just to address what you've said there, yeah, absolutely, we should be enforced against people who are just making absolutely no effort to comply with the scheme at all. However, there's always going to be, that hardcore of people who don't want to comply, and I am slightly worried of this idea that, we don't want to set a precedent and we don't want to pick up rubbish straight away that's been dumped because, then what's the point of doing it in either case? The problem with that is that the neighbours of those people who maybe have complied, and done the right thing, they are then suffering, because we want to teach someone a lesson. Rightly so, but it's frustrating because, as I say, you do need to educate, but the rest of our residents feel frustrated that they're paying the price for the actions of their neighbours. Thank you.
100% agree with that comment, and we've looked at that, and I have spoken to residents, spoken to officers, and initially we're going to put signs up saying that CCTV could be operating in your area. Again, I know around where I live that works, and let me tell you now, we will be putting CCTV cameras up to actually keep those people. So the decent people out there who are doing the right thing deserve us to take further action, and we have here the evidence that we will be doing that. And we have had instances where some members of the public have videoed and sent it to us, but quite rightly, I totally understand it. If it went further, they'd have to go to the legal process, and they would then be identified as the cameras coming from their property. So and they won't do that, and I understand that. But this is us doing it as a council, and we will do it, and we will act on it, and we will take it to the furthest that we can regarding fining and treating them in the way they deserve to be treated, those people. So we will be doing this for the decent people of this borough who are abiding by the rules. What I will say, in some of the areas, these people still do not think that they're actually dumping rubbish. They're just putting it where they always thought they have, and because we're not collecting it, it piles up. And the more they continue to do that, the more we're going to use things like this. They will move around the borough. So, which is why we'll put up that it may be operating in your area. I'm not going to say it is, because but it will be enough, I hope, to frighten the people off of doing it. And I use the word people very loosely when it comes to the people that are dumping there. So we have that, exactly what you said, and we will be employing it.
Just to come back to Councillor Wingfield, in terms of our intention is not to leave it there for as long as we can. Our intention is to get enforcement officers in to search those sacks, find out whose they are, and then take the appropriate action, education or enforcement. That is the intention. I would agree, the first few weeks that was difficult for us to do and difficult to manage. It is improving, and our enforcement officers, and with the introduction of our new reporting system, which has given us far better data, not the old system that you all used to go into. The system that you all report into is now very different. We see residents and your comments, that is generating us hotspot maps, which means we know when it's likely that staff are going to need to go there to either try and catch when it's happening or very early, so that residents are not being inconvenienced any more than their next door neighbours are doing to them. So it will get more intelligent. We're building that data up. The teams are working in those areas now, and it will be sharper and more directed and targeted.
Thank you, Chairman. So I think just to add to Paul's point, to reiterate what the enforcement officers are doing on the ground, they are educating, they are enforcing, they are having those conversations on the doorstep. I think that where we need to go is to make sure that they are more coordinated between our refuse teams and our cleansing teams. I'm on a WhatsApp group with our refuse team who are sending lots of pictures through. Our enforcement officers are on there as well, so they are sharing that information between them, so they can then make sure that they're being put into the right place at the right time. But as Paul said, it's about gathering the data, deploying, and making sure we're making the best use of all of our resources, aligning our cleansing service with our enforcement team, joining the teams together, joining the boots on the ground alongside our residents, who many of whom come to us and say that, you know, if enough is enough, and we want to provide you with a witness statement, we want to provide you with any of the evidence of what we've seen, and wherever possible, we will take that forward as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Councillor Wingfield did about 5 sets of councillor questions there. Okay, so Councillor Harrison, the floor is yours, and feel free to ask multiple questions if you wish.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean the main question I've got is around the blue recycling bags.
I'm really sorry. I want to let you speak on it. Later on in the report, that might be a more appropriate time to bring it up, because we're discussing just the substantive, the black residual waste, the weekly or fortnightly collections, and the impact it has on residents. While that is a point that I think has merit and is something that I want to talk about as well, it's beyond the scope of this particular part of the petition, because it's not actually in the petition itself. So if you have another one that's more related to that, great. Otherwise, I can't let officers at this time respond to that question. But go ahead, Councillor Harrison.
No worries. I'll talk about the black waste now then. So yeah, I mean I would like to know the evidence base that the officer had for saying that it's just pockets of what I call mountains of black and pink sacks around our estates. I mean, I visit not just the estates in my borough, but the estates all over Belton, both north and south of the 127, and I don't know a single estate that I haven't seen at least one mountain of black and pink sacks. I see them just about everywhere, and it is embarrassing as a councillor knocking on those doors and speaking to those residents and saying I thankfully I'm not a member of the administration right now, because I can only imagine the abuse you guys are getting if an opposition member is getting the stuff that myself and my Labour colleagues are getting. But yeah, it's an absolute mess on every single estate that I've visited since this has started. It's far worse than it ever was before, and so I'd like to know what the evidence and the data that you've got to support the claim that it's just pockets and that it's getting better, because that's not what I see when I'm walking around the estates myself.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you for the question there. So I think that we are basing this, as Paul said, we've got the reporting tools that come back to us do keep showing highlighted hotspots. They do keep showing areas. Residents are very keen to let us know where those hotspots are. But we've moved our street cleansing teams into being more area-based and working on the following up on the day after collection. So that, as we start to tie that together with our enforcement teams, they will have a better view on the ground of each area and the pockets within that we're finding that. But I've spent a lot of time since the service was introduced driving around the borough. I spend a lot of time with my crews on the ground. I spend, I'm out and about in the borough daily, having a look around, and that's what I'm seeing. It tends to be in the garage areas. It tends to be in sort of the alleyways in the end bits. But there are some areas which we need to make sure we focus our efforts on, which are being reported through to us more, which our crews are seeing more than others.
Okay, Councillor McGeorge.
Thank you. One of the answers to my question earlier got missed. If we got a number as to how many more fly tips we're attending for domestic fly tipping rather than commercial. And also another one, because I've now been...
I tell you what, why don't we let them answer, so just in case they forget it again, let them answer that one, and then you can do your... I promise you, after Councillor Wingfield letter, you can have infinite number of questions.
Thank you, Chairman. So Fly tipping is reported nationally through fly capture database. For Basildon, we report those figures quarterly. So I think that there are Q3's figures within the report which we've got tonight. Obviously, we compile those on a quarterly basis, and we will be reporting the figures, the substantial figures since the service changed on the Q4 report, which I think comes to this meeting in March, doesn't it? I think it's so that they are reported nationally. They're available for everyone to interrogate. I think talking to colleagues across Essex, it's fly tipping in general is on the rise across the country. I think that we're seeing that, but what the split is by the proportion of that that is residual and residential household waste that's produced and presented incorrectly is something which we do record as one of the categories for fly capture. So that information will be publicly available in future, but we don't report it until the end of the quarter. So that's where we are. Q3's information is submitted to DEFRA. Q4's will be submitted obviously at the close of Q4.
If I may just follow on before you get your next question, I promise you'll get it. I promise. Do you, for example, what about January? Do you have any figures for fly tipping in January specific that you might be able to share with the group?
Not yet. So those numbers are compiled in arrears at the end of every quarter and submitted to DEFRA as part of one of the things we have to report through the National Fly Capture database. But then all of that data is publicly available as well to interrogate, but yeah, it's a central database of all local authorities up and down the country. But I know anecdotally from talking to other Essex authorities that they are seeing fly tipping in general up, and that is something which is happening in the region as well. So we are seeing that across the board.
Thank you. This isn't actually something that I'm expecting you to have a figure for, but do we know how much of an increase there has been at Pitsea Tip since this has all started?
Thank you. That is something that we are in contact with colleagues at Essex. They haven't been able to give us up to date meaningful information as yet, but we have asked for that. It's provided to us so that we can build that into our total modelling to see whether to see what the impact has been at Pitsea, predominantly Pitsea, because I think that's the one within the borough rather than any neighbouring sites. But obviously that site's run by Essex. We have asked Essex for that information, but it hasn't been provided yet.
Okay. What I would say is I'm a little bit. I'm so sorry. I'm a little bit frustrated with the fact that we don't have figures yet, and I do understand the reason why. So that's understandable. I think will be very keen in our next place meeting, providing the information is available, for us to revisit this point, because I would also like to know the impact it has on fly tipping. I had heard cautiously optimistic reports that it might have been down. I've heard a lot of people saying it's probably up. But I think clarity on this matter is a high priority, and I think if any councillors here tonight, or not here tonight, would be very interested to know. So if that can be widely circulated, that would be appreciated. Councillor McGeorge. Thank you for your questions. Councillor Chard.
Thank you, Chair. What is the issue with the reporting system? The reason behind this question is we have a particular area that is literally every week we're getting calls is being black bins, black sacks dumped there, and it's massive piles. I've reported this. The last time I reported it, I had to chase it up, and the only way I could get it dealt with was when Councillor Jeffrey actually intervened. Then it was cleared up on there. So is there an issue with the system, or?
So when we launched in November, we had two databases running, which was the old database and a new database, which was causing an issue for obvious reasons, that we were dividing it and struggling to understand what was going on. That's now been cured, and we have one, and we have a portal which you see on the website that will take you through to report. Now, what we have found, and we're now working on that with our colleagues in the CRC, that we were getting multiple reports from multiple areas and complaints from residents to members telling you that they'd made a complaint and it hadn't been resolved, and the complaint is not on any database, so a complaint had not been made. So what we've instigated a task force that are behind the scenes dealing with the new system and making sure that when members report something, that we can check very quickly whether that's been reported and report it back to you that it's not been reported and that your report is the one that's happening. So there was a lot of, we described it smoke and mirrors, that lots of people were complaining that we hadn't attended to pick anything up, but it hadn't actually been reported. There are some that have been reported that we hadn't, and we put our hands up to those, but that was a lot to do with the double sets of databases running. We now have one set of single view of the truth. We know what's happening, we know what the issues are, the teams are working on that on a daily basis. We've put resource to make sure that those are answered quickly and dealt with quickly. But we're in a far better place than we were at the start, and I do apologise to all those residents and members that have had to suffer the same as James and I to try and get to what the hell are we doing and where is it coming from. But we would ask all members to go through that portal and report, or ask residents have they reported it and what is their reference number, because without that reference number the likelihood they've not reported it, therefore you'll be reporting it for the first time. So there's been multiple, up to 6 or 7 times reporting on one item and from the same person. So it's making it very difficult that have we done the job yet? So a sheet has come back, the sheet comes back that the job is done. We're finding is that another one? Is that the same one? So that's what we're now getting to cure at the moment. So apologies for that. We have improved it. It is getting better day by day. And once we get in-cab technology, which is shortly to be procured, that will be far easier, because when those incidents are reported, the vehicle will go there and then the job will be on their screen for them to tick that it's done, and that will automatically generate an email straight to the resident or to you as members to say it has been cleared. It may even contain a photo of us clearing it, but I'm being told I'm pushing too hard. But that's where we're going to get to. But the database to be able to do that is now in place and working far better than the problems we've been having over the last couple of months. Oh,
When I first started, I had the same problem. Go.
Yeah. Are the Wombles, the Wickford Wombles, being tasked with clearing up after the collection bins? Again, the reason behind this is because we're seeing on Facebook, I've reported this and I've been told to contact the Wombles to clear up afterwards on them.
I can absolutely clarify. We wouldn't ask any volunteer group to be doing a job that is ours. So there is no instruction from council officers to do that, and certainly not in my teams. We have already changed our cleansing service that on a Tuesday would go through Wickford, so there will be no need for Wickford Wombles to be going through, and that's the same for every part of the borough, that the cleansing team will go in the following day, which in the past the team were going in the day before the waste collection, so therefore missing any spillage. So we've changed the service, so there is no reason the Wombles can carry on doing exactly what they've always done. Our teams have got it covered.
Thank you, Chairman. So I think that not specific to the Wickford Wombles, although I know the work that they do and I know it's well received and well supported, and they do a brilliant job, and it's the things that the groups like the Wickford Wombles do are fantastic for community, and they bring people in who wouldn't normally get involved in those things. So I think that there are a number of community litter picking groups that we engage with and support across the borough. We provide equipment for, we provide clean-ups, but it is around the service that we provide as well. So we provide the service, but we work with them. So where we've had things come back from community groups in the past, we've made sure that that's fed back into our pride teams, into our cleansing teams, and it is something that volunteers do, and it's over and above the service that the council provides. So we wouldn't expect them to do the council's work. We're not expecting them to do that. We're expecting them to be, they're not expecting them to do anything. But what they do from the kindness of their own hearts is incredible, and I think that should be noted. And our thanks go out to Wickford Wombles. And there are a number of community groups which we work with across the borough, and we'll continue to support them with equipment, clean-ups, Even, we've gone out and worked alongside them on occasion as well. So I think that's worth flagging up.
Sorry. Yeah, I recently had a resident. She contacted me and advised that a wheelie bin had actually been partially emptied there. Obviously, from my door cam, what I have been meant to do is reach into the bins, take the sacks out, and then put them into the truck on there. So she's asked us to look into this and why a bin is being left, that one bag, and then she is fastidious about how she recycles. She does everything by the book, this particular resident on there. So I don't know if you can sort of ask them to look into that and ask them why they're just taking the bags out instead of just taking the bins and everything.
Sorry, Councillor, are you referring to the blue and white
No,
sacks
the black
there?
sacks, the black bins.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for the question. So I think one of the considerations for introducing a wheel bin collection for residual waste was the damage that it was causing to our staff. So we were finding that we get members of staff come to us with back injuries and so on, and part of what you want to try and do with the wheel bin collection is you're trying to remove that manual handling element, and you're also trying to remove the risk of sharps and cuts and needle stick injuries and things like that. So there should be no reason for a member of staff to reach into a bin to pull a bag out. That bin should be tipped. So unless it's completely wedged in the bottom and they can't get it out for any other means and on the lifting mechanism, as long as they're following their safety at work protocols, if that's not happening, I want to know about that so we can make sure our supervisors do some more checks and training with the crews to make sure that they're wheeling the bins to the vehicles and not emptying it by hand. So that's there to protect their own health and well-being. As part of the health and safety protocols, that they should be only collecting and emptying into the vehicles. So, yeah, I think that's worth flagging up.
And to give you assurance, if you report it, we do have CCTV on our vehicles so we can check as to what, who, when and where.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Charles. Councillor Allen.
I've got a second question, but as you're talking about reporting, I'm reporting using councillors' inquiries and our streets app. Is there another way of reporting?
No, that will go through to that user.
Both of those go through. Okay. The main part of the question was that you've given us food waste up 35%, residual waste 23% reduction. Could you put some money on that? I mean, are we saving millions here or a couple of grand? You know, your bill for residual waste disposal must have been certain thousands or millions, and now you save 23%. What's that saving in money terms? And also the food waste, which hopefully no longer goes in the residual waste, that must be a plus factor on money. So, you know, can we put some money rather than percentages on this? Thank you.
Thank you. I think that is one of the key considerations both for our strategy and for Essex's waste strategy, which is in development currently. We operate within a two-tier system. We're the collection authority, with Essex being the disposal authority, and part of both strategies talk about limiting the impact of waste management on the overall taxpayer, whether that's us or whether that's Essex. Disposal and the food waste contracts are both held by Essex, but obviously we'll have those conversations with Essex colleagues where our recycling credits come into it are on things like dry recycling and glass. So I think that once we've got a few more months data, we'll be able to say what the full impact is on Basildon's budgets, but safe to say that a reduction in waste is a reduction in cost on the taxpayer in general. Whether that be borne by Essex or Basildon. So reducing the amount of waste to landfill is the most expensive way of treating the material that we have. So managing that in a more environmentally friendly and financially sustainable way does help to reduce the overall cost of the taxpayer, whether that's borne by Basildon or Essex.
I think the the major part for us is, yes, reducing residual waste, which then boosts our recycling. Now, recycling for us, from a pink sack, we were going to be spending this year, if we were carrying on with the pink sack, would be spending somewhere in the region of 1.4 million disposing of that, and that is our cost, that's nobody else's cost, that's not county. By separating that waste, as we currently do, that costs us zero. It balances out. So that's a saving of 1.4 million just on recycler. We've got to, that's on our current assumptions. We will have a better idea of whether we're achieving that, knowing what the cost of card is, etc., which fluctuates. But at the time we went to market and our procurement, that was basically come back to zero cost for us to tip that and be taken.
Well, I must say that's more saving of £2 million is much more impressive than 23% or whatever percentage you quoted. But if you're saying we're saving, you know, this process is saving £2 million, I mean that's well worth stating. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Allen. So, Stephen Wood.
Yeah, this will end up in a couple of questions. First of all, where we live in Vange, I can say there's been no one that I've spoke to has heard about any education or communication apart from the little leaflets regarding anything to do with waste. There's more black bags, and I think you'll see more black bags with green waste in due to the cost of the green ones going up. So there'll be less recycling, I believe. And the thing that really gets me is where all the blocks are throughout all the borough, there's been no provisions of storage for these bins. Outside the blocks, it's just a row of black bins. It looks horrendous. And I think this should have been done before the bins were actually distributed. And what is the protocol for the dump bags roadside? You know, is there a timeline? Because I was told there was an amnesty and the bags that we had were not collected till 2 weeks after that amnesty finished. So I'd like to know when the storage bin, or when there's going to be decent storage for the bins, and the timeline that dumped stuff should be collected. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your questions there. And I know we've been in conversation about some of the issues which you've spoken about tonight, and I appreciate that, and I hope that carries on. I know that our officers have been in, today they're in Great Mistley, Gordon Road, Frettons, for example, so they are working their way around the borough. But the undertaking for flats was that we had, the decision was taken at Cabinet to allow adjustments to flat blocks, and our recycling officer's been working block by block, because that's the only way to do it. They've been going around piece by piece and making those adjustments individually. If you are in a flat block which you feel that the provision is inadequate, please let us know, and we can, recycling officers can revisit that and make sure that we've got the right containers in there. I know that they are looking at different types of recycling containers for some of the flat blocks as well. I think that's going to be an area that we'll need to continue working on. Flat blocks up and down the country are difficult to get recycling. We have seen greater engagement from residents in flats as part of this process, but that is through a laborious and painstaking approach of going block to block and talking to people, and that's what we'll continue to do. Because we knew when we looked at this, we knew that the majority of the borough could have a standardised service, but the decision was obviously taken to allow adjustments for people within blocks as well. So I would say that in terms of timescales for clearance, we're working around the borough at the moment, and that ties into the response we gave earlier around tying in with our cleansing teams and our enforcement teams. Where there are hotspots, again, report it, and the more reports we get, the greater our attention will be for that area, because that helps us direct our resources towards those areas. So thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, just on the education side of it, you're saying you've not received it. I know for a fact that every household has received in the region of 3 leaflets. We've had road shows going throughout the whole of the borough. We've had videos, YouTube, Facebook. We've now just had a county have just delivered. Not saying I was totally in favour of the sticker that they put on the bins, but none more for that. They've also done it. So there's going to be a minimum of 4 leaflets that have gone out on this alone, let alone all the road shows, I say videos, YouTube. So I don't disagree with some of the comments you made, but regarding the education, I think we've done a fair bit on that.
I'd just like to respond. I do dispute the fact that the education has not gone on in vans. I can guarantee that because I speak to a lot of people. They've seen the leaflets, and no disrespect to a lot of the people I speak to, they cannot read anyway, so the leaflets don't mean anything. There's been no road shows and there's been no visits.
Sorry, I'm not going to be told there's not been any road shows. There has been road shows, and that's a fact.
Thanks to Councillor Blake. So there have been road shows around the borough. Perhaps maybe Vange wasn't in that road show. I don't know. Don't want to comment on that one or stir the pot any further. But did you have a question as well? You seem to have a second question.
Yeah, the question was around the storage for the bins for the blocks, which has been answered, but it's just wait and see when the timeline's going to be, really.
Absolutely, I'm sure we'll eagerly await an update. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Wood. Okay, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I should take a leaf out of Councillor Wingfield's book with a few questions, and just following on from my constituent, Mr. Wood, those stickers are the ones that are the same colour as the Nazi flag from the garbage Gestapo of County. Now, as we all know, last autumn, Essex County Council launched their waste disposal policy. They've given it some garbage, you know, that save the planet, you know, if you have a warm summer, the polar bears are going to get it and all that cobblers. But when you get through the spin and you actually get down to the facts, by 2028, they want all of non-recyclable waste burnt. So why have you engaged in this policy of imposing fortnightly bin collections when you know within 4 years, if not sooner, because the Rivenhill incinerator in Braintree is about to come online, if it hasn't done already, there's an incinerator planned for Tilbury, and on the last Friday of May, the North Essex Mafia will approve the incinerator in Pitsea. So why have you enforced this on residents when counties just going to burn it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. So I think that we were due to present back on what the Essex Waste strategy was tonight. We've given various updates on Basildon's part as part of the Essex Waste partnership. That is due to come back to the next meeting, isn't it? So there is a further meeting at the end of February where we will be talking about the Essex Waste strategy and the development of that and what that means for Basildon. So I think it probably would be better for that item, which was, again, it was going to be tonight, but that's been moved back to the item at the end of February.
Although I'm sure you could come back for the end of February for that meeting as well to discuss and express your viewpoint then. Okay, do you have another question?
Oh, like a machine gun tonight. Now, a constituent screenshotted this. This is from these wonderful, dreadful Facebook pages, yeah, where truth goes to die. And I'm sure members of the administration will appreciate that comment, where the truth goes to die, face social media. But this company was advertising on one of these local Facebook pages operated by, you know, the Karen types, say no more. And it says here, this was posted just after Christmas. Don't let your black sacks build up. We are collecting for £2 per bag, minimum of 15 bags. Let's try and help clean up this mess. And there is a detail and phone number, but my constituent realised what was happening is this was getting picked up and dumped in areas like the back of Wichards and got the person who runs this page to block this advertiser. But they was going around other Facebook pages advertising that fee. So for £30, 15 black sacks gone. And the reason I raised that is what the point of this petition was, is that people's black wheelie bins can't cope with the volumes of waste. And when you see this advert, you and your neighbours club together, say, look, you've got some black bags, I've got some black bags, you give me 6, I've got 8, bang. And this guy gets 30, and we know where those black sacks go, not in the correct place.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. And I would urge caution against anybody using one of those fly-by-night contractors. I think in the past, in this meeting and at previous meetings, we've spoken about the importance of the individual duty of care and the responsibilities we all have to take with our waste, and just palming it onto somebody who's going to go and dump it in a lay-by, you're still liable as a householder. So there is some information on our website. There's some information on if you Google or other search engine called Crime Not to Care, it will give you some information about what your responsibilities are as a householder to make sure you don't fall foul of any criminal activity.
Thank you. My next question, following on from there, Mr. Chairman, is that clearly residents are being pushed into a corner to do that, which leads on to litter bins and dog fouling bins. And in case someone says I'm making things up, Mr. Chairman, if you was to walk out your front door without me identifying where you live and head left to the next junction, which is about a minute's walk, that, as a Friday, that dog bin, and it's a nice area, was overflowing. People are just pooping it on there. The litter bins are full, and these are not particularly...
Councillor Smith, I know the bin well. I regularly frequent that with my children. Prior to the waste changes... Yeah, well, walk past it, certainly. Prior to the waste changes and the one also in the parklands in the Langley Hills area, they were overflowing well before these changes were implemented. So not to contradict your point there, feel free to carry on, but long before the changes happened, during COVID, those bins were overflowing quite significantly. I think that might be a slightly different issue. But carry on.
COVID's long gone, and people did have a lot of time on their hands went walking, but I'm trying to say here, since you've even put this restriction of how much rubbish people can put out, people are using litter bins, dog bins, and my team are right mustard with those litter bins in Langdon Hills. They get onto my group and we get them chased up, but it's now becoming a regular basis. As soon as those dog bins, as soon as the litter bins are emptied, rather than residents take that dog stuff home and put it in their black sack, they're putting it on top of the dog bins where they're overflowing. So this is why residents have signed this petition. That is why I raised the point. What are you going to do to stop people abusing these bins, shall we say? They need to be used, they need to be emptied, but with litter bins, some people are putting stuff in that is domestic.
I think, Chairman, Councillor, if they're reported through to us, we will feed that back into our cleansing crews. We'll look at the frequency we're cleansing them, and if they are being used for other things, then we might need to talk to people about that. But I think there is a thing around tidy fly tipping where people think they're doing the right thing, placing a bag next to a litter bin, for example. If that's happening, bag gets ripped open, it kind of goes against the point of what we introduced the wheel bins for in the first place. So I think report it through to us. We'll make sure that the collection frequencies are correct, and if we need to change them, we'll change them.
I had to go on from your day trips, excursions. It sounds quite fascinating. To Councillor Blake, through the chair.
Councillor Smith, if I may, try to make sure you bring this back to the petition clearly.
Other members have wandered off. I've not complained.
Well, not without me having a go at them. They haven't.
They have. Talking about the Wombles.
Okay, that was the limit there. But try and please bring it back to the substantive.
Well, that's where I've been all the way with this, Mr. Chairman. Because people's black wheelie bins can't cope with everything. They're putting dog and stuff in the bins rather than take it home like they used to. Because anyway, getting back to where I was. Now have you made me lose my train of thought, which wasn't rather sporting. But yes. So Councillor Blake speaks of this particular estate. We live on the same estate. I live one end, he lives the other. I have raised it at last week's Scrutiny Committee, and Councillor Tierson and yourself, Mr. Chairman, said you've been on about my neighbour's miscollection. I had a meeting last night with officers about the budget amendments. There's a missed special collection from early December. Can that finally be collected? And just while I'm speaking, just behind it, there are 8 black sacks dumped in the willow bushes. And I drive out, and along as you know, Councillor Blake will know, Ryan, as he would go along, just black sacks still dumped in the corner. It may be good, to Councillor Blake, where he is, but there's other people on that estate who are just using the greens as places to dump because of the restrictions on what they can put out for the dustbin. How many times you've got to keep reporting the same thing for it's cleared? You've had me, Councillor Tearser, Councillor Gascoigne, Councillor Reid.
I think, Councillor Smith, I've put what you said to me yesterday through to the team to clear, but I will check that with you before the end of the night, just to make sure that I've got the address right, because it seemed like you were talking at two separate things. So I don't want to get the.
3 doors down for me, you know where I am. Mr. Chairman, I don't want my visitors. I don't mind Councillor Blake. You can have a slice of cake and a cup of tea. But I think, just before I finish, it is fair to put it on the record. That statement from the petitioner said about referring to a leaflet issued in May 21. Councillor Blake had nothing to do with that leaflet, and the author of the leaflet, Councillor Rimmer, should be here to justify the reasoning behind it. I'm not here to split hairs, but Councillor Blake, I may thoroughly disagree with this policy, but I treat Councillor Blake with the respect he's due and lock arms with him in this chamber, but I don't make it personal, nor do my constituents, and it's a shame the trolls on Facebook, when they reference this leaflet, don't actually go after the naughty boy, or rather the council's Pinocchio, Councillor Rimmer, who also told some porkies that I'm a big property magnet developer as well.
Okay, thank you for your statement, Councillor Smith. As Councillor Rimmer, who you've accused of this, isn't here to defend himself, I think it's unfair for us to... I cannot comment on that, but what I can say is he's not here to defend himself or make a statement. I think it's unfair at this point to bring it up or make that kind
Mr. Chairman,
of
the
accusation.
Representation of the People's Act 1983.
Yes,
He is listed as the election agent, so by law he doesn't have to be here. If the offence is done misleading electors, and I'm
Okay.
defending Councillor Blake's honour, he didn't tell not one porky. We may disagree with Councillor Blake, but he's an honest man.
And I echo your sentiments about Councillor Blake, but nonetheless, I would prefer, I'm not going to split hairs on the legality of it, but I prefer Councillor Rimmer was here to actually defend himself against such accusations. I would also please like to notice, and I'm sorry because I do sound like the broken record at this particular point, but the claims made in the statement here are not actually what the substantive is about. It is about the black bins, and for the most part what you've talked about is the black bin. So, but that's what we're going to focus on, not other claims made in there, which I think are, again, beyond the scope.
Well, to be fair, Mr. Chairman, I think with what Newsnight ran last night of attacks on councillors, where almost a third of councillors are not seeking re-election, we have to protect each other from lies and defend the people who tell the truth against these horrible trolls on Facebook telling lies. As I say, on the policy I disagree with Councillor Blake, but he's always been honest with people. It's people with big noses like Pinocchio who've let Councillor Blake in this particular conundrum.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith. So, moving on, John McKay.
At last. Right, first of all, as a resident, I would wish the bins to go back weekly because I'm finding it hard. When I go home tonight, raining or not, I shall do all my bins, put everything in a black bin. And I reported stuff at the last meeting, T&L, about black bins being dumped, and they're still being dumped, and I'm not prepared to keep continuing going around my community centre and picking up the rubbish that's being dumped because I'm paying over £1,000 a year for that bin to be collected, and I'm filling it up with rubbish that's coming over my fence into the bin, and they're walking in my back gate and dumping it in my bin. The point about it is you're not picking up stuff. Round the back of the shops, there's blokes sitting there in them white vans eating their cups of coffee, going round the cafe and everything. And I said to them, are you going to pick all them bins up? No, we can't pick them up, mate. Can't pick up. They're not supposed to pick them bins up. So they stay there week after week after week. There's a bloke, regular basis, comes and dumps glass in pink sacks. There's people come and dump black bags. There's stuff being dumped there before Christmas, and it's still there outside people's houses. It's black piles up bins, and you're not collecting them. So where are all these people going around looking at these bins? You had the Wombles going around here, there's 7 of them. They spent more time sitting outside the front of the cafe than they were picking up rubbish, and each of them had a bag and a stick. Yet my local bloke, who goes around clearing up the rubbish, you've taken his bin away. So he puts his rubbish bins alongside the bins in Yardley's. They'll get picked up for a fortnight. Foxy's had a great day. Even my own dog now goes and picks the rubbish up and comes back to me and says, "Here, look, what do I do with this, mate?" I'll put it in the bin. So I'm putting it in my bin because you're not collecting it. What's the point of me reporting it if you're not going to pick it up?
Okay, so it's a bit more of a statement than a question, but I think we've got a response for you anyway.
John, I know we've spoken about a few things in the past, and I know I've offered myself. I've been out to the community centre. I know that the enforcement officers have worked quite closely with you in the past. Well, that offer is still there for you if you want to take us up on it. But I don't think you've come back to set anything up yet, but we are there for you on that. So we are there for you on that if you do want us to come out with you. And I think that the other thing we spoke about at the last T&L around the trade bin that you've got was around the registered charity status and the fact that we do have concessions available for registered charities as well. So there was a conversation that we've had previously around that. But again, like I'm myself and my team are here for you and the community association as you need us. So please take us up on those offers.
The trouble is you're not picking it up. If you go round to Thornbush, now this is a regular thing, there's a pile of rubbish. Want to see photographs? I'll take the photographs. And there's stuff in the bushes that's not been picked up. You're not picking it up. If you're going to go, if these blokes are going to sit round in their vans, give them the, if it's been there for a fortnight, because they're every day, if they see it there for more than a week, pick it up. Because the following thing, it blows in the road, a lorry comes around, squashes it, and it's everywhere. And it blows in my community centre. Everywhere's filthy. You know, Basildon used to be a nice place, but it's a tip. I have a mate who comes down from up north, comes down once a month on deliveries. He said to me, you know when you get to Basildon, because all the rubbish is here and there's potholes. Yeah. You know, it's ridiculous.
Yes, although I think, again, potholes are not only beyond the scope, but also beyond the remit of this council. But one of the points raised there, actually, by John, which I thought was very valid, is what about waste that's put in bushes? So, you know, we can see easily identifiable waste that's been chucked on the road, for example, or there's a big green, you know, patch of land in Pitsea, wherever, and, you know, you've got a mountain of bags accumulating, or at least we did. What happens if they put it like in a bush? Not quite so easy to find. Do they still, will they go into the bush and take it out? I mean, what's sort of the protocol? I mean, it's almost, I don't want to say a treasure hunt, that makes it sound like fun, but, you know, sort of you've got to hunt this down, stuff, and find it out. What's sort of the extent at which removal of waste, what sort of lengths will they go to get rid of it? And will they literally go into a bush to pull it out to then get rid of it? Just as an aside, if I may.
Thank you, Chairman. So there's a number of things available to us there. We do, obviously, as part of our cleansing team, the aim is to regularly clean to EPA grade A, which is a published standard under the Cleaner Neighbourhoods Environment Act. The other things that we've got at our disposal, when our grounds maintenance contractors in there, they do have to do a scavenge before undertaking any grounds maintenance. And we've also got the Pride team. Pride teams go in and they will thin out, tidy up and clear areas out if there is a deep build-up of things and detritus that needs to be removed. So, yeah, there's a few things available to us.
So, thank you for that one. Okay, so we'll move on to Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to quickly bring it back to something that we were talking about half hour ago. If you don't mind, I understand we've been around pretty much everybody today, but just on the fly tipping data that you mentioned, Chair. When we eventually get the data, will it show, or will the data include the size and the scale of the tipping? For example, if there used to be one black bag chucked on the side and now there are 20 black bags where that one bag used to be, does that count as one piece of fly tipping? Because I would personally count that as 20 pieces of fly tipping, because there are 20 individual bags there. So that when we were saying earlier that the amount of fly tipping may appear the same or even lower, is the scale of the tipping in that location being taken into account, or is it just a mountain of black and pink bags counts as one piece of fly tipping? Because I would count that as 20.
It's quite a boring answer to this one, I'm afraid, this question, because there are categories, and I think it's a the categories that we report to fly capture are around. It is a single item, a car boot load, a van load, or a tipper load, and it basically does it based on the size of that. So we do record the size of what's there when we remove it. So that's something we do have to report back through that same reporting channel as well.
Okay, thank you very much. So that just leaves us with Councillor Wingfield.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarification, first of all. I think Mr Mackay made reference to the Wombles kind of sitting around outside the community centre not doing anything. Just to clarify on that, the Wombles groups are not employees of the council. They're not. No, they're not. No, they're not. I'm a member of the Wombles, of the Langdon Wombles group. They're. You.
Okay.
No, I'm talking about the Langdon Wombles as well.
Mr Mackay, I tell you what, I will let you.
Could we get some
I'll let you
clarification on
respond.
that? 'Cause I don't
I'll
want
let you
this-
respond in a moment.
Yeah.
I think, and I hope I'm not talking out of turn here, that we've spoken about community groups and volunteers a bit tonight, and I think that we've recognised the important work that they put into the community, and we're grateful for what we do, and we'll carry on supporting them. I hope that what John's referring to here, and I hope that he isn't referring to our collection crews or our cleansing crews sitting up, and that's something that they're entitled to their breaks, and I'd encourage them to take their breaks. But obviously, our staff work hard across the borough for the benefit of our residents every day. So I hope that is the case here, and we expect the same things from our staff day in, day out. They work hard for residents of this borough, and I think that that's something which obviously we instill on them on day one, and we hope that carries on day in, day out.
Yes, and we're very appreciative of our volunteers, but to clarify on that point, the Wombles are not council employees. They are not paid or, well, to be honest, how about, are they resourced by the council? Do we give them equipment or training or something like that you could argue? But essentially, but there is absolutely no employment contract with the Wombles in any way. Is that correct?
If we're referring to the Wombles as in the volunteer groups that operate across the borough,
Well, the kids' hit show,
yeah, we do provide them with equipment. We provide them with support around, even risk assessments and things like that. We'll provide them with bag clearances. There are a number of groups that go by a number of different names. Some of them quite imaginative and good, but we do support a number of community groups across the borough, and we'll continue to do so. Some of them are individuals, some of them are wider groups, but we'll continue to do that. But they are independent of the council, but we do support them wherever we can.
Okay, great. So, Mr. Mackay, did you have
in the words of that man sitting over there, James Hendry, they are the Pride team or an area cleaning team.
Yeah, Pride team, but they're not Wombles.
Well, we classify them as Wombles because they're picking up rubbish.
Well, no, there are
Yeah.
groups called the Wombles.
That's why we never get nothing done here.
Call them what they are, I think they're saying. Call them what they are, the Pride team.
Okay, cool. Well,
that wasn't my stance.
okay, all right, fine. So that was just a point of clarification. All right, this is your last. Hopefully, this last
Right,
thing.
so
you
this is the question, and bringing it right back to the petition itself. Obviously, the petition is asking that we go back to weekly collections, and we've heard arguments about why that maybe not be viable. I believe the majority of councils now collect residual waste on a fortnightly basis. But there are still some that are retaining weekly collections, and we've heard that there's a very significant saving generated by fortnightly collections. And councils across the country are not exactly swimming with cash at the moment. So have we looked at what these councils are doing that are retaining weekly collections to see if there's something that they're doing that we're not, that makes it more viable for them? Or is it simply a case of, the clock's ticking and they'll eventually go down this way? But it would be interesting to know if there are councils that are kind of, have picked up on something that we're not, that are allowing them to retain their collections.
I'm happy to pick that up, and it's something obviously this is a long journey which goes back to 2018-19. We've had cross-party member working groups. We've had a lot of officer working groups to get to this point. We've looked at authorities up and down the country in looking at different options that are available to us. And I think that there are a number of authorities across the country that are moving to or looking to move to 3 weekly collections for residual waste now as well. So there are things up and down the country that people have gone further and more extreme, but that was something which was ruled out by the member working group and ruled out of the decision. So I think that there are different models up and down the country in terms of those that are retaining weekly collections. A lot of the ones that still have a weekly collection are finding the same issues that Basildon had, in that 2/3 of what was going into our residual waste was readily recyclable through our existing recycling scheme. So there are, as we've heard tonight through the diversion through food waste, as we've heard through the requests for glass boxes, as we've started to see through some of the tonnages and changes to residual waste, there are changes which are taking hold, and those numbers which Councillor Blake read out earlier, they include early numbers for January as well. So we are seeing that those behaviour changes are starting to stick. We are hearing those conversations on the doorstep, and we'll continue to do the education piece around maximising the ability to recycle and minimising all of our environmental impact, because it does need a lot of people to make small changes to start reducing all of our environmental impact overall. So thank you, Councillor.
All right, lovely stuff. I've had one last-minute addition. Hopefully this is relatively brief.
Yeah,
Mr. Wood.
It is an actual question. You stated that we was going to save approximately 1.4 million earlier. Is there a reason why that cannot subsidise the extra charge for the green bins, which may encourage people to put their green waste in the green bins rather than the black sacks?
Unfortunately, that is beyond the scope of the
Well, no,
petition.
that would affect what goes in the black sacks, because people are going to put black sacks with grass in.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, but that is you're talking about a major decision there as well. And while I'm sure that resonates with many, that is beyond the scope or here of the petition. But I'm sure there'll be another opportunity at a later date to look into that one a bit more. All right, okay, so I think that's everyone done. We managed to... let me get to it. Let me get to it. Because there's you know, there's some steps. We need to do some closing remarks, you know, let it happen, let it happen. I will give you a comfort break, don't worry. Right, okay, so we've heard quite a lot, and obviously this issue is a really contentious issue, and I think it's fair to say certainly all of us councillors have definitely heard from our residents about this change, and it has been a bit of a shock to the system, I have to say. And I think tonight there has been our officers, and more our officers really than the Cabinet for Waste, have had quite a good grilling. And we've heard different things, you know, a few things here, particularly to do with concerns about fly tipping from Councillor Smith there, and also Councillor McGeorge. I think the highlighting the quality of the service was quite a good point there made by Councillor Child. I think the issue to do with bin collection lid ups and the idea of having the whole sort of a common sense approach was an absolutely great point raised there by Councillor George. I think also some of the points made by Councillor Wingfield to do with the future planning against you know, Christmas waste, for example, and additional containers, really great points made there. And yes, mountains of bags. From Councillor Harrison, I think my understanding, my belief is they are going down, disappearing, soon will be gone if they aren't already. But I think absolutely that is unacceptable in any council, particularly ours. I think also, though, Councillor Allen really made a good point there about the asking officers for the 1.4 million saving in recycling. I think that's definitely a positive, and we do have to consider the financial impact of this. And I think other members here or other people here have highlighted the frustration of residents. For example, Mr. Wood highlighted the fact that he didn't feel particularly well educated on the matter. Fair enough, and like I say, the waste where charities, from the one such as from Mr. McKay, of having his own bins being filled up by other people is deeply frustrating, and I think it's something we need to stamp out on. I think, though, looking at this as a whole, I'm seeing a potential saving of 2.4 million with everything considered. I'm seeing a reduction in CO2 emissions. I'm seeing food waste improved. I'm seeing a reduction in landfill waste. Certain areas are actually cleaner now as a result. I know not all. I'm not saying all are cleaner, but some are. And actually, our council has a 0.8% failure rate for our collections, which actually for starting a new scheme I think is actually not that bad. I think also the whole idea about educating, particularly on lids, with the common sense is going to be a priority, as will be, as a pledge from this administration, funnily enough, that we're going to make it easier for residents to get second black wheelie bins for the families that really need it, I think, which is absolutely right. And like I say, looking at sort of the old system for how we reported waste, we're now looking at the new system, the new methods of doing it, and hopefully with improved reporting, we'll see also residents less frustrated when collections are missed. I think there is, I would like to probably end with thanks to our voluntary teams, particularly the Wombles, who have done an excellent job at supporting our council through thick and thin, good weather, bad weather, and you know, I want to give them massive credit. We're really appreciative of what they do, and like I say, we want to work with the Wombles and other voluntary groups to get the best out of our council. So a special thanks to them. With that in mind, I would now like to hand over to Councillor Blake for a closing statement. But just before I do, I think tonight a lot of people have made a lot of really great comments, and I think those are for the Cabinet Member for Waste and council officers to note and be aware of. This is feedback from our scrutiny, and we would like you to investigate, action, and we would appreciate an update on this at a future meeting, as we're all striving to have a cleaner, greener, more environmentally friendly Basildon, Wickford, Billericay, Pitsea, and we want a better town, we want a better borough, and with you know, Godspeed in helping achieve that aim. So, Councillor Blake, if you could make a closing statement, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, we have to respond to the petitioner in writing, so that will be done, and I'll be talking to officers regarding that. Listened to a lot of things being said today, and it's been a good, honest debate, and I think that's the important thing. And we're always looking at ways to improve our service. And on that note, I'm big enough, and I'm certainly ugly enough to admit when things haven't gone as according to plan. And therefore, I'd like to announce tonight that we will be replacing the reusable sacks. And I've asked officers to develop options for their replacement, which will take on board our collection staff and, more importantly, our residents' feedback, and seek to make improvements on these moving forward. I will ask that officers undertake trials and take a decision is brought to a full Cabinet meeting. However, we will ensure that we get this right. So I can announce tonight, not maybe, we will be replacing the sacks.
All right, that's great news. Thank you very much, Councillor Blake. Right, well, with that,
We just have a general consensus
Oh,
from members that they're happy with the statement.
okay. So, can we have a general consensus from members that they are happy with Councillor Blake's statement?
I'm happy with that, but you've forgotten your chairman's write up about council women's election fibs and trying to put them onto Councillor Blake.
We'll just have a show of hands on this one. So can everyone raise their hands now if they're happy with his statement? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I think at that point, a well-earned 10-minute comfort break is in order. The time now is 8:34, so if we could reconvene at 8:44, have a nice little break, everybody. Thank you very much. All right, everybody. Thank you and welcome back. So we'll now move on to item number 5, the grounds maintenance specification. That's page 17 to 30. And I will hand over to the relevant council officer.
Thank you, Chairman. If you're not bored of me yet, hopefully you won't be soon by the end of this item. So I think that this item is an update, really. This is at the last meeting, which was in November. We brought forward some of the discussions, and we sought the endorsement of the Scrutiny Committee for an approach towards grounds maintenance, building on some of the work we've done over the last couple of years on the service, and that included talking to residents, talking to parish and village councils, talking to elected members, and looking at our options in terms of what our grounds maintenance contract was providing, how it was delivering, what it was doing on the ground. And we went through some performance details at the last meeting, and members of this committee endorsed an approach to the cabinet member of seeking to extend the existing arrangement with some minor in-contract variations for a period of 2 years to allow for a more detailed scoping of some of the potential changes to be explored in more detail, and also for some more detailed and indicative costings to come back. And I'm joined tonight by Steve from Plan B, who's been supporting us on this project, and Steve's sitting behind me tonight, so we're going to be doing a bit of a double act tonight, really. The first part I'll talk about is the progress and where we've got to so far. And then I'll bring Steve in, who'll talk about the proposed changes to the specification that we're looking at. And really it's an opportunity for members tonight to have a look at the work that's been done so far through both the officer and member working group, to note some of the areas that we're looking at, and to provide any feedback that officer and member working group may wish to consider prior to presenting something to Cabinet, which we're aiming to do in March. And what we're aiming to present in March is the feedback from the officer and member working group, the outline of the specification, and the proposed routes to delivering the service in the future. So with that said, so the last meeting, members recommended to the cabinet member that we create a officer and member working group. They have met on a few occasions. Having been in both the officer and member working group, I think it's been really interesting to hear a number of perspectives from colleagues and from different elected members, which we've taken on board. At the last session, there were a number of different options which were considered, and some of those were narrowed down, so we can go into some more detail about what those options are and why others were excluded at that point. And I think that we've had conversations around the potential impacts of this service moving forward, how we might want to move to a more flexible delivery model, the implications of some of those changes, and where we might want to consider putting our resources in the future, but being mindful of the impact that those changes may have on the borough. I think that's probably a good place to bring Steve in from Plan B, and Steve will be able to give us a bit of an overview as to how we've got to and the things we've considered today, and then it'll be an opportunity for members to ask questions of myself and Steve around that. So I think if we can, we've got a little bit of a presentation to walk through as well, which Steve will take us through, if you're able, Lee. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to kind of give it a bit of context, if it's okay, if I just give you sort of a couple of minutes of about Plan B and why we've been engaged. So Plan B was formed in 2006 as an environmental services consultancy, initially providing support to the larger contractors for environmental service council contracts, so waste collection, street cleansing, grounds maintenance, household waste recycling centres. The company was bought in 2019 by the current owners, and it's diversified a little bit since then. So the focus of the consultancy business, which is the bit that I'm involved in, is now more with local authority and local authority trading customer clients rather than the private sector. There's a materials trading division of the business, so that looks after recycled materials for councils, and we broker that and trade it on their behalf. And there's a managed service element of the business where we help our customers directly deliver services and that part of the business is kind of an area we see for growth. And from April this year, we'll actually start delivering our first service contract ourselves. So my team I started in local government 35 odd years ago in Rochford, so fairly local. So I've worked in environmental services all my career, as have my colleagues in consultancy. So between us, we've got many years experience in environmental services in an operational and bidding capacity, so designing services and then delivering services. So we don't just sort of come with theory, it's, we've got the battle scars of actually delivering these services ourselves. So that's kind of the background, that's probably enough for that. So we were engaged by officers to support a project to look at the future delivery of the grounds maintenance service in Basildon. And there was specifically two areas we were asked to look at: the delivery model, so how the service is delivered, and then the specification. So the first area is the service delivery model. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So there's kind of a range of options that you can use to deliver these sorts of services, ranging from a service contract, which is where you are now, to a fully insourced DSO service, and there's a number of options in between. And really where it's quite often a policy decision, but it's the extent of the influence and control that you want over the services against the risk and reward that's associated with that service. So in terms of risk and reward, the lowest risk is an outsourced contract, but obviously you've got very limited control over that once you've written the specification and let the contract. Completely opposite when you're operating it in-house. You've got lots of control over the service, but any fluctuations in costs, that sits with you as an authority. So we looked at these range of options. The ones in the middle typically are options where the services are packaged. So rather than just a standalone grounds maintenance contract, it's quite often let with other services. So it could be streets cleansing, it could be waste collection, or the strategic partnership is more where more than one authority joins together and let a joint contract. So we did a bit of a scoring of those options, and if we go to the next slide, those middle options, which tend to be a bit more complex than what you really need, were the ones that scored lowest. So we took it back to the member group, and we've sort of moved forward from there now with the outsourced option, so let a new contract or extend the current contract, or an insourced option, either through a LATCO, local government trading company, or a DSO. Those partnership options didn't feel appropriate and they scored that way too. Next slide. So we did some indicative costings. So what we did is, if you take £1 that you're currently spending now, if you look at the different options, what's the value of that £1? So extend the current contract. There are some minor changes. So in all of these, they're all based upon the current specification apart from the bottom one, and that's the first draft of the specification that we've worked on. We've since revised that, and the changes we've since made would reduce that slightly. So the extend the current contract based on the existing specification, the difference really on that, or the main difference on that one is really inflationary. We've gone into kind of the next financial year, and so a lot of that difference, probably 4% of that, I would say is inflationary. Procure a new contract was slightly higher, and Matt, who does is our sort of grounds maintenance expert, he's got over sort of 35 years of experience of bidding these contracts, so he's got quite a good feel for the market. So based upon his experience of the market, that's where he felt that bids would be kind of pitched. Obviously, you don't know until you actually go to market, but based upon his experience, that's where he felt it was at. The in-source version with the LATCO, slightly higher again. So you've got the cost of setting up a company, the associated cost of running that company, so there's some kind of corporate costs that would go with that, so HR support, finance support, that kind of thing. The DSO model, the biggest additional cost in that one would be the pension commitment, going back to a local authority pension scheme, but that was offset to a large extent. There's no need to make a profit on the service, you just need to cover the cost of the service. So one almost offset the other, and it's kind of very similar to extending the current contract. The new contract with that specification was moving from the current frequency-based service to a performance-based service. So in that scenario, the bidders would take the risk on providing the level of cuts, for example, to deliver a standard. So again, based upon Matt's experience, he took a view on how many that would be. Your current base service is 8 cuts a year. He based this on 10. So that's really the main difference in cost. It's like what's that, 25% increase in resources effectively on the grass cutting. But the contractor is taking the risk on the standard then rather than the council. So that was the kind of the initial cost indication that we did. And from that piece of work, we've kind of, next slide, sorry. So we've ended up with kind of 4 options still on the table. So there's 2 outsourced models, extend the current contract, but negotiate some changes because our understanding is the current specification wasn't delivering what you wanted, or procure a completely new contract with a revised specification, or bring the service back in-house either through the LATCO model or the DSO model. And we've discounted the partnership and joint venture options, which was agreed at the member working group on the 23rd of January. So that's the sort of the delivery model part, and then the next bit was the draft specification. So we took the current specification, took the feedback that there was a previous piece of work that the council had done with stakeholders to feedback against that specification. So we've tried to incorporate some of that into the new specification. We've tried to make the specification more robust. It was quite a loose specification within the current contract. We've also changed the structure of the document. So this document now talks about strategic aims for the council, so it's trying to tie the service back to sort of corporate strategy that are important, things like climate change, social value, biodiversity, and then there's a set of service outputs. So what is it you're trying to achieve from the service with the contract? So it's got kind of slightly different focus from where it was now. The outputs include things like improving communication, community engagement, which were areas that were seen as weaknesses within the current specification. We've tried to build in a flexibility, so a common sense redirection of resources, so weather is changeable and obviously has quite a big impact on this service, so it's trying to have a common sense approach that enables us to deal with that. And we're also asked to include the ability for parish and town councils to top up the core service if that's something that they wanted to do. That's probably more a pricing issue rather than a specification issue, but we were asked to have that kind of option in there. Next slide, please. Oops. So it's quite challenging when you're doing this type of work, because it's tempting to, it's almost like a child in a sweet shop. You kind of have this long wish list of stuff that you want, but you've got to kind of keep it real and make it affordable. So you're constantly trying to find this balance, particularly with this sort of service where it's not a statutory service as such. Is making sure that you're delivering a level of service that you're happy with, but it is still affordable. We had some fairly detailed discussions around the different options or approaches for delivering the service. So the input frequency based spec, which is what you've got now, against the outputs more standard based approach. Following those discussions, the general feedback from the officer group and the member group was generally there was more comfort around the frequency based approach. It was perceived that that's probably, from a clienting point of view, more straightforward to manage. You know how many cuts you're buying, so it's either been done or it hasn't. Whereas if you go for an output-based spec, there is a grey area of have they achieved the standard and have they achieved it today but not tomorrow, and it's a bit grey and probably more resource intensive to manage that. And then we were asked to, or as part of the discussions, look at priced options. So that would allow the council a mechanism to flex the service. So if you had a particular season where the grass was going sort of quicker than normal, it gave you that option then to order an additional cut if that was what you wanted. So it's around the additional grass cutting cycle or an additional summer prune. So we've produced a second draft which has incorporated those changes. It's obviously a work in progress. There's still some refinement to do, but I think the kind of the big ticket stuff we've kind of got boxed off now, and it's more around the more detailed points of detail. And then there's some confirmation around some of the council more general requirements. So requirements around the commitment to a greener fleet, for example, which again needs to be considered against the backdrop of affordability because it will have implications. So that's really where we've got to with it. Sorry?
And I think before Steve wraps up and we are pass over to any questions from members, I think that if we talk about the journey that we've been on in the officer and member working group and the discovery sessions before that, we spoke about some real key themes that we wanted to make sure were baked into this in the future, about future proofing, making sure that we're hitting our mark on biodiversity, but also making sure we retain a flexibility within the service, but having in the back of our minds that we wouldn't want to obviously commit to anything that would cause any massive financial impact on the council. So there's weighing up all of these things when we're doing a project like this is complicated, and I think I want to thank the members for giving up their evenings to attend those working groups, the officers for giving up their time, and for Plan B for their support and expertise in getting us to this place. I think one of the key things which came out of the conversations, particularly in the member working group, and this was also replicated in the officer working group, which is the commitment for what we deliver on behalf of Essex County Council and the funding associated with that, and that's something which has been picked up at both of the groups as well. So I think that that's something which we'll be taking forward and looking at around the level of service that we provide and whether there is any subsidy for that for work that we're undertaking on behalf of Essex. I think that we'd looked at a number of different options through both the groups so far, and they even ranged from things around, clearing all the grass after it was cut, which we looked at, and that would add a significant cost to any future service delivery model, and also even down to things like minimum standards and minimum heights and upper heights for grass. And we looked at that, and that was one thing that which was explored. But obviously, you would need a significant army of inspectors going around with tape measures, and it's about being fair and proportionate and targeting the limited resources we've got on the areas which are of most importance to our residents. So a large number of the conversations have been around having that flexibility in the future that helps to contribute towards our biodiversity needs, that helps to contribute towards open spaces that people want and use and engage with, and that also contribute towards the look and feel of the borough. But recognising that there are some locations where we might need to have additional options. We might want to have enhancements that might be down to parish councils, village councils as well, who may wish to enhance above a core service. That may be down to us to make those decisions to enhance those services further. So I think that where we'd focused on was around amenity grass and potentially looking at things like sports pitches. A part of the feedback which came through from colleagues in parks was around that if we only cut the football pitches themselves, then that becomes the area for all of the traffic within the park, whereas what you want to be doing is doing the whole of the area around, so you're not then degrading your football pitches, so that by the time the winter comes around, you've got nowhere to play football, and then you're causing people injuries as they're trying to kick on a pitch that's been poorly maintained. So it's being pragmatic and airing those things out and trying to build in flexibility in a future model that also doesn't scare any future service provider into pricing. So if pricing for risk is expensive. So if we're building in a specification that has risk baked into it, we will be paying for that one way or another. So it's making sure we're weighing up all of those things. So I think that again, there's been a fair bit of work so far. Any feedback tonight will be taken on board by the officer and member working group at their next meetings, but I think it's a good opportunity to have a bit of a conversation as to how we've got on so far and the feedback that we've provided members with tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any opening questions? Okay, so obviously please indicate as we progress. Councillor Wingfield.
Thank you, Chair. Since I've been elected and involved with local politics, I've sort of realised that change often comes at a sort of almost semi-glacial pace. And I see that you're requesting an extension to the existing arrangements while you put this draft together of 2 years, which seems a long time. I mean, in the presentation that we've seen, looks like you've kind of highlighted what direction you need to go in, what kind of needs to be done. Why, for the benefit of residents who may be listening, why is it that it will take 2 years for us to get to that stage?
I think that's an excellent question and one which is definitely worth answering, because the reason for the 2 years is there are a number of delivery models which Steve talked about previously. Through the work that we've done, work with the cabinet member, is we've kept as many options on the table for as long as possible until we narrow those down towards a few key options. But that decision was only taken by the member working group at the last iteration of that. So now we've started to narrow it down. What we don't want to do is to say we've only given ourselves a very short period of time, because that starts to limit our options further. What we did through the working group and through the member working group as well was around making sure we do this properly and for the long term. And so I think that reframe the thoughts of the extension. When the contract was tendered, it was tendered with an option for up to 7 years extension. So that is the length of the contract. But what we're saying and what the feedback has been is that we want to make sure that we have a specification that's right for the longer term. So it's right to do the right thing and consider as many options. And 2 years will give us enough time to look at each of those options, which has been requested we carry forward. As mentioned in Steve's presentation, there is an outsourcing model and a couple of insourcing models, all of which, or particularly the insourcing ones, would be more complicated, and we would want to allow ourselves time to make sure that vehicles is something I've spoken about before in this committee. I know that if we were to order vehicles, say, they can take a while to come in. So we want to make sure that whichever option we chose, we gave ourselves enough time to deliver against the expectations of it. So that's one of the reasons why the 2 years was recommended to put in place. So, thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Mr. Wood.
Yeah, just thank you. Looks like there's been a lot of good work's been put into this, and as far as residents are concerned, that I can see from our point of view, most important things are communication, engagement, accountability, and the actual impact is going to have a look on the environment to make it look better for residents. And that's looks like that's going to be put into place, and just hope that that is the case. We've quite often come up with questions about the daily operation and the way that works, but I think the details, perhaps I could email you with those problems, because it's not something that can necessarily be discussed now, because they're minor but major, if you know what I mean. They're things that could happen or should happen daily that isn't necessarily the wider picture. And if James is happy, I'll email you, and yeah, thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. Councillor McGeorge.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's great this is being looked at, and with the way the great British weather is, and hear the rain out there now, I definitely think you need some flexibility in the contract so that if it's hot, you're not cutting grass. When it rains again, the grass is going to overgrow. You're going to need to get back out there again. So that's fantastic that you're looking at that. Now, I've just got a question in regards to the pruning side of it. Now, obviously, we go around, we cut all the hedges on all the estates, things like that. More specific to the odds and ends in the estates that shouldn't be there, is that something that ID Verdi are currently looking at and the new contractor would be looking at, or is that the Pride teams sort of like weird and wonderful bushes growing out of places that shouldn't be there? Like, it happened. I've got 3 buddleias in the wall, still there. I think I bought them up about a year ago. They're still growing. Whose responsibility would that be? Would that be the contractors, or is that the Pride teams? Just so I sort of know what we were looking at in the new contracts.
Thank you, Councillor. So I think it depends on where it is and what it is. The self-set trees and things like that, a lot of those we would refer back to our Pride teams, whereas some of the team have done some brilliant work on formalising some of the previously informal hedges which we had across the borough. So when they formalise them, they can put them into the contract. They then go on to the regular and routine prune. So I think it depends on where it is and what it is. Self-sets and things tend to be Pride teams, so we'll go in and clear some of those out.
I think it also plays to what Councillor Wingfield was saying. The last contractor missed stuff that needed to be done, and it wasn't identified quick enough that it was being missed. Self-sets being one of those things. We might not notice them when they're that big, but we'll certainly notice them when they're going up. And then, of course, what resource have we got to go and do that? We can't just, add water and staff appear and they go and do this work. So that's why we wanted to go through this process to make sure we've got the specification right that picks up all those things that we definitely know we need doing, and those that were missed and not in the previous contracts or allocated to any council teams to do. So that's why we want to take the time to make sure we've got it right.
Thank you for that. Councillor Blake.
Yeah, I was just going to reassure Kevin behind me that the contract that we had that many years ago, we're one of the other reasons why we're doing it now is because there's some of the things that we now want to experiment, because the climate has changed, as you quite rightly said. The issues we've got now are what we never had 7 years ago. So the company we're working with now are actually being more flexible and working with our members, our staff, etc. So they're actually a more of a joint-up unit now. So some of these things that we might be saying, I wonder if, they can go out and try it and see if it works. If it works, then they can feed that back into the working group and the officers so that we know where we stand. So it's not just a case of, why are we going to a new contract? This contract isn't fit for purpose. It isn't now. It was 7 years ago, but it's not now. But they are adaptable and working a lot closer with our officers to ensure that it's running a lot smoothly, and what will work and what won't work, and obviously the cost implications of that in the long term.
Thank you for that, Councillor Blake. Yes, I mean, admittedly, he heard you in spirit. Mr. McKay.
Thanks, Councillor. Going back on the same old thing, I keep reporting it year on year on year on year. The blokes getting out of their cabs, they've got masks on. They should have in front of their face when they're cutting with the big trimmers. They're not doing it. I've got photograph after photograph after photograph of these people doing it. One of these days, we nearly had an ear accident a couple of years ago. One we got a pyrocanter straight in the middle of his eye. It's part of the contract. If they're going around in gangs of 7, 8, it should be an health and safety person on that team to tell that person, put your mask down. It only takes one cut and that's gone in your eye. And plus the fact, I walk literally the same route year after year after year. And 1 year the edges are up, next year they're down, and now they've got this new machine that theoretically we should cut them nice and level. And they're not. So whether the bloke's half blind or not, they look lovely, and then all of a sudden you look back and it's up, down, up, down, up, down. You might laugh, Bob. Oh. No, it's serious, because residents going, who cut that? And it's no good me keep coming to these meetings year after year after year and saying about it, and nothing's done. Can we literally, if these people are going to cut edges, can we have a uniform photograph of that? So when the bloke goes around, he goes, yeah, all right, we cut them down to this level. we cut this bit off, we leave that bit, we let it grow up to a certain level, and we cut the rest. Because it's not, it's an higgledy-piggledy. If it was your own garden, you would make sure that everything was right. Sorry, but that's, you know, I keep getting in the neck every time. They've just been round our place, and, you know, every time. They're not, it's ridiculous.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Do you want to feed back on some of those comments, please?
Thank you, John, for your questions there. So I think that we presented at the November scrutiny meeting a section around health and safety and the commitment of our contractor towards that. It is a regular item which is brought up at the contracts meeting, and any incidents are recorded as part of that and minuted as part of the contract monitoring process. Obviously, in terms of the winter prune, I've been on the ground with the contractor. We've got inspecting officers on the ground with the contractor. We have a contract manager who is on the ground with the contractor. There are some brilliant officers who are working on that contract and doing some great work across the borough. So I think it's worth highlighting that on the council side we are inspecting, and on the contractor side they are delivering the work. And the health and safety issue was raised at the last scrutiny meeting on the request of this committee.
Lovely. What about the idea of these highly variable heights of these hedges? Do you have anything on that? Is there a particular standard they're meant to follow to? Is there a set hedge height that they're meant to work towards? So I'm not trying to be facetious, just trying to get an idea of that.
I think it depends on the location. So obviously they do prune for light in sheltered accommodation and things like that. So it does. And last year in winter we worked with the contractor to go for a more severe winter prune than we would normally see to enable us to get back to a previous point, rather than cutting back to the previous point, which has then grown a little bit every year and then raised. We asked them to go back a bit further, which might have seemed a bit drastic in some places, but that did help. So we work closely with them on those standards, but it would depend on the location and what they're cutting back at the time.
Yes, and no doubt the frequency of the cut. Okay, Councillor Allen.
I couldn't quite gather, your presentation seemed to be a specification that was definitive, so it's like 10 cuts a year or 12 cuts a year for the grass. But when we read the draft specification notes here, there seems to be an idea that there would be some flexibility. But I thought that we were saying to home in on the cost, that's your 10 cuts a year, and that's it. And then we know where the budget is. But there seems to be some flexibility, which means we have to pay more money.
If you order that extra work, so it would be if you ordered that extra work. So you've still got the control over whether you decide to do that or not. But it'll be a priced option within the bill of quantities. So there'll be a standard of 8 cuts for most of the amenity grass. Some of the sports and leisure would be a bit more frequent than that. But then if you wanted to have an additional cut, there would be a rate within the bills for that, and then you decide whether you want to do that or not.
And apart from timing the cut, is there a specification for the 8 cuts would all take the grass down to 2 inches high, or because if it's got up high, you might sort of just take a bit off it rather than sort of take it down to 2 inches.
But there's a standard in there after cutting, so there is a height to achieve after the cut, which is kind of a fairly standard industry standard.
And the standard for hedge cutting, so what is the standard for hedge cutting? I mean, because you can murder a hedge, or you can sort of just trim the edges. It's quite variety, I'd have thought.
Should be in the specification, but that's part of the sort of the technical expertise that Matt would bring to it. Would be that the standard will be kind of defined within the specification.
And I think if I may add to Steve's point there, what we'd previously said in the contract is we specified to previous point. in the winter prune. So that means that as that bush grows, then that previous point goes a bit further out, and that's why we said last year, actually, no, take it back to the original point of it. So it's about how you word that and specify that moving forward. And on the frequency thing, it's around making sure that we've got the right resources in the right place, and we'd looked at doing that across the board, but said actually the key areas where we get the most issues are around this type of grass. So it's about having that flexibility within that, but also not leaving us exposed to a something which was very much, you know, a lower and upper, which prices some of the risk into the contract. So it has been a bit of a balancing act so far. We've met, I think, 4 times as officers and 3 times as members to get to the point we're at tonight to bring something back to you, and that's since November. So it's been quite a pace to get those meetings in with Christmas in the way. So we have got a further member working group plan to take on board any feedback from tonight. So if that needs clarifying, that might be something which you might want to suggest back to us.
And I hope there is nothing in the spec about murdering hedges. I think let the hedges live. Let the hedges live. Right. Okay. So.
They recover from murdering.
Oh, they do recover from murdering. Okay, fine. So it's a survivable murder. Very good.
If there are no further questions for tonight, before we go to your closing points, we've got some next steps which we're able to give to members tonight to highlight. Oh, of course, yeah. But after that point, if we, yeah.
Before I ask my questions, Councillor Blake, I believe, had something.
Yeah, it's just on Stuart's point there about the 10 cuts or what. It really can be down to, this is the idea of the flexibility of it, is that you could have a situation where it's an absolutely scorching summer, no rain at all, and the grass just doesn't grow. Do you really want us to then go around and cutting grass that actually doesn't need cutting? So it's having that flexibility to go into the service and say, look, it's still short as it was when you last cut it. Can you then move that crew to do something else in that time? So I think that's where the real flexibility comes into it, where it's not necessarily been there when we first done the contract 7 years ago. So I think that's where we come with the flexibility of it, to be able to move it, and officers working a lot closer with them to be able to achieve that.
Lovely stuff. Okay, so my sort of questions to, I suppose, follow up really on that one. So delighted to hear there's flexibility in the contract now. But in terms of costings, does that mean, so let's say our standard is, I think it's 8 was mentioned. If we have a year where we only really need 6 cuts, do we save money? Or, for example, let's say we had a year where we did 7 cuts, could we then move that one saved cut from that year into the following year and then have 10, 8 plus 1, hold on, to the maths. 9 cuts the following year, could we do that? And what are the implications of cost? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So I think that the way that we're talking about flexibility is flexibility to deploy resources on the ground, but with a floor level of cut. So if we wanted to enhance by another cut, there is an inbuilt mechanism within the contract to allow for that to happen. Obviously, the contractor will have their vehicles, they will have their staff, they will all be on wages. They won't bring people in for each cut specifically. They will be there. So the flexibility is around deployment of resources, so that if we wanted to say, if there was a dry summer, the grass wasn't growing, they were just cutting dust everywhere, then we'd say, well, okay, there's no point doing this cut, the grass isn't growing, let's pivot our resources towards supplementing what the Pride teams are doing, doing self-sets, doing some other works across the borough to improve the borough. So it's about having that flexibility built into the contracts. But so you wouldn't be able to carry it forward, but you could use those resources which you'd already paid for within the contract on something else for the borough.
I see. So no bonus cuts for free. Fine. Then that just brings us to the cost, because we saw 5, I think it was 5 different contracts, or 5 or 6 different contracts, where we had like same as what we've got now, all the way up to, I think it was £1.23, a 23% increase. So there you go, some fast maths there. Just like looking at those kind of costs, for that £1.23, that 23% increase in cost, what are we getting for that, and how does that compare risk, cost, flexibility wise to just the £1 renewal contract that was at the top of it? What's the difference in terms of flexibility and cost? Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll bring Steve in to answer some of the specifics on what was modelled as each part of those. But I think that don't get hung up on the £1 versus the £1.23. What we've done with those values is they're indicative values. So £1 spent on the current contract specification would cost you £1.23 at the revised specification. What we will do now, members have decided that not all of those options will be taken forward. We can do some more detailed cost modelling to say that we think that delivering this level of service through this model is likely to cost this. So that enables us to then focus our efforts on the 3 or 4 options which Steve ran through as part of his presentation. And I'll pass over to Steve to go into a bit more detail, if you can, on what was in that specification.
Yes, specifically in that version, with the enhanced spec, there's 2 additional grass cuts a year and a summer prune over above what you're currently getting in service.
And is that the I'm sorry to get hung up on pricing again, but is that the £1.23? Is that the £1 thing? Is that the 106 thing? Which one of those does that? Just the POS up to 10 and the prune you mentioned. Which one of those bandings does that fall under?
The £1.23 is the additional cuts and the summer pruning. The others, the differences tend to be around the level of pension contribution, the level of profit. So if it's an outsourced model, the level of profit will be different to an in-source model. If the services are delivered in-house, the type of pension scheme that the employees would be in would be different to if they're working for a private contractor. So it's those type of costs that are making up the difference on the other versions. So the specifications consistent apart from that last one.
So, because just make sure I'm clear on this. So let's go do the one just before the £1.23. I think I can't remember what it was, 116 or something. But whatever that was. So what would the service for the one just below the £1.23 be?
All of the others, it's the same specification that you've currently got. So it's the same level of service that you've got now. It's just a different way of delivering it.
Right, okay. I mean, I think my only concern here, and this is something I would like to feed back on, obviously I've said that's a 23% increase on the current contract. I'm not saying that will be what the final cost increase, but obviously, well, for example, what is the current spend? What is the current spend contract per year on this? Can you tell me? Sorry to ask you a technical question off the top of your heads.
I think the indicative figure is about £1.6 a year, £1.6 million a year.
So, you know, up to 23% increase on that is a sizable chunk of change. Is that a worst case scenario we're looking at with the 123, or is that sort of there is still room for manoeuvre in that and we might be able to make other improvements in terms of the price?
I think at this point we've just put indicative pricings down based on what we've seen other services when it's been provided. So, like I said, I wouldn't get hung up on the exact value there. What I would say is that what we've put in there is an indicative thing to say that if you want to go for this specification, that is likely to cost you around 23% at current market conditions. But obviously now we've got a steer around the potential types of delivery for this service moving forward. That means we can then do some more detailed cost modelling in future. And I think that the other models that were presented were around showing what the impact might be of insourcing for the reasons that Steve highlighted around additional pension contributions and any other commitments the council may have towards living wages and so on, and what might impact there.
Yes, I think we're expecting, I mean, just with inflation there'd have to be price increases, but nonetheless, Mr. Brace.
It's a good point. That is a very large chunk of money, but of course that will be members' choices in terms of what specification goes forward and the budget envelope that's available to pay for it. So that will be part of the consideration, as James has said, once we're working through the models and we're getting the costs of doing these things, then we will be able to understand how much more that would be if we want to increase the current specification, and a choice will have to be made of how that is funded. So that will be part of the process when it gets towards the end of it. But it will be members' choices.
So thank you for that, and yes, I would be very interested to see that. If there's no more questions on the docket, do Do we need to do anything, vote or anything? Is it just for feedback?
Yeah.
Lovely. Okay. In that case, so thank you very much. Oh,
Would you like us to run through the next step?
that was it.
Would that
That's
be okay?
that's absolutely fine. Yes, please do. What we'll do is we'll make that a sort of concluding statement, and we'll call.
That's it really. So 8th of February will be the decision on extending the current grounds maintenance contract. That's this Thursday. Member working group will be on the 20th of February to take on board any feedback from tonight and any progress towards the revised specification. And then we will be taking the outcomes of that back to Cabinet in March, ahead of a fifth and final member working group on the 28th of March. And obviously the officer working group will be meeting around those meetings as well. So thank you, Chairman.
All right. Thank you very much. So that would be item 5. I mean, I think that was a bit quicker than the previous one. Let's see if we can continue that momentum. Ooh, I think there we go. There's a nice challenge set there for item number 6. So this will be the designation of parks and countryside sites. And I now yield to the relevant person who will speak on this. Josh. Thank you, Josh.
Right, just bear with us 2 seconds. We're just having a bit of technical. There we go. I mean,
apologies for that. Couldn't get my speaker to work. So thank you very much, Councillor. I'm going to introduce this item, and then Josh is going to talk us through a presentation for discussion. This is an exciting and important piece of work that the team's been working on for some time now, alongside our regular colleagues, Natural England, to look at the designation of a number of sites all across the borough that I guess the truth is we manage and deal with like they are nature reserves, but under the terms of classification are not actually formally designated as such. So Josh is going to talk us through a number of these on the basis that we take your comments and we'll be attending Cabinet next month, should there be agreement, to formally seek to classify and a number of different sites and have very real clarity around where our nature reserves are and our other parks. Clearly that's a really good positive outcome for us, because it means we've got that clarity for our neighbours, for our neighbourhoods and for our communities, and knowing where their local green spaces are and knowing where those significant pieces of nature recovery places are. Also, it enables us to work more thoroughly with Natural England and offers us opportunities also around stewardship, funding and the like to be able to manage these things effectively. So I'm going to pass over to Josh, who's going to talk through the work, and we'll obviously answer any questions at the end. Thank you.
So one of the reasons why we're doing this, and I brought it up last time I was here, is we've had the State of Nature report, and you can see there is a decline in quite a lot of things, in species, in insects. So it's important for us to start protecting our sites. These protections as well will also help us identify them, and then we'll be able to implement the right management and then hopefully increase their biodiversity. Also, alongside this, we've been reviewing our parks and open spaces. A lot of them have names and their names don't reflect on what they do. So this is why we've kind of gone through and we've explained the definitions. So in our park sites, we've broken down into 4 areas. So we've got our play areas, which is just a fixed piece to play equipment only. So they're the ones you normally find in your residential areas. We've got a recreation ground, which is a formal sports, which has formal sports and games, which our Parks Country site team manage, and they can also have fixed play equipment. We have our parks and open spaces, which are just amenity bits of grassland used for recreation and can have fixed play equipment. And then we have our town parks. So obviously we've got our Wickford, Northlands, Gloucester Park, Lake Meadows already as town parks, and part of this we want to give Langdon a town park, which is Victoria Park as well. So we're going to roll that in so each town has its official town park. So part of the work that we've been doing is trying to define our countryside sites, because we manage quite a broad area of the land. there's quite a lot of different bits and pieces. So I'm not going to go into all the full definitions, but we've got a country park, which is kind of your gateway to nature. So it's somewhere where it feels more comfortable, but you're not being chucked out in the urban environment. And then we've got our countryside sites, which are areas of habitat which we've identified in our biodiversity action plan that are left in their natural state, or we've created from scratch. So, for example, Beauchamps Meadow, that was just playing fields, and we've created that into a proposed nature reserve. And then our countryside sites can get designations. Some are informal, so like nature zones, which is a phrase that we've coined. So we're trying to put more wild areas in our urban environments. So you find them in parks, in our housing estates. They're not kind of out in the sticks. And then we've got our SSSI sites, which is a formal designation which we don't actually contribute to. That's Natural England who turn around and say, we need to protect this. And the last one, which is our local nature reserves. So that's where we would look and would decide, are we going to say that bit of land is a local nature reserve? So just to give you a bit more information, because we're looking to designate a total of 8 in the borough, 7 of ours. Pretty much they are declared under Section 21 of the National Parks and Access to Countryside Act. They're for people, wildlife, and the local interest areas. They offer the opportunity to study or learn about them. So obviously school groups can go into them, members of the public, so we can do comms and bits and pieces along those lines. And they range from anything from our coastal sites, like down in Wat Tyler, all the way to our inland grassland sites or our more urban brownfield sites. And they're an important resource because, as I said in the first slide, we've got a decline and we need to try and protect these. So I'm not going to... Well, sorry, I've jumped ahead there. So Natural England have a accessible nature green space standard. So this is a nicety and it's something we should really aspire to have. And it's in the report, but the key one I want to pick out is a minimum of 1 hectare of statutory local nature reserve per 1,000 population. So currently we have 113 hectares in total. The proposal will give us an extra 55.9 hectares, giving us 169.2, which sounds great and it's getting there, but we are still slightly short, only by 18 hectares, which isn't much. And as we go through, I may be coming back and we may be asking to actually try and protect more land so we can reach that really nice standard to say that we actually do have a hectare of statutory nature reserve per 1,000 population. So I'm not, just to give you a bit of, sorry, my team. So at the moment, we've currently got these 3 designated, which is Vange Hill, Mill Meadows and Norsey Wood. Once we designate, so the ones in purple which appear on the screen, then we've got actually quite a nice spread out selection of different sites. So we've got brand new created sites and sites that we've been managing as nature reserves, but actually have got no formal protection on them. So to go through the list, we've got Beauchamps Meadow, which was a newly created site in 2020. We've got Giddings Copse, which is adjacent to this, formerly called a nature reserve, but actually has no designation on it. And tying it into our biodiversity action plan, you can see we've got a lowland mixed deciduous woodland in there, and then which then feeds into our priority species, which is bats. Going forward, you've got Norsey Meadow, which is a little bit further up from Norsey Wood. That's in a current restoration. Langdon Common is one we're working in partnerships. The Church Commission actually own the land. It's not one of the 7 we can designate, but working with them, we may be able to bump it up to 8 because they're quite willing to get on board with that one. We've got St Nicholas Church Hills, which is a newly restored site, which is well worth a look. Noak Bridge, which again has been formerly called a local nature reserve, but actually has no designation on it. Cranes Farm Nature Zone, which is a new project. So this site's just over 1 hectare in size, and it's quite unusual because for a nature reserve designation, normally Natural England will say to you it's got to be over 2 hectares. So it shows that even the smallest bits, we can pack a lot into there. We've got Netherland bushes, and they are our sites. So I've rattled through that quite quickly. Is there any questions?
Councillor Wingfield.
Thank you, Chair. I'm thrilled to see that Victoria Park in my home ward of Langdon Park is got to finally get the recognition it deserves, recognised as a town park alongside those in Basildon, Billericay, Pitsea and Wickford. It is a wonderful and very widely used space, and I hope that this designation will help to encourage more residents to make use of it and to pay it a visit. I'd like to just ask Josh, aside from a bit of recognition, what are the benefits of a designation for a town park beyond what it currently gets as a kind of just a general park or open space?
At the moment, so our town parks, it's not going to get anything different, but it's just there on the radar. So it's kind of, that's the hub to start off. And if you look at our town parks in Wickford, in Gloucester, they start community groups, and it's kind of the hub for the community. So we can kind of create these areas where people want to go in, they want to join, and we can grow it out. There's things that Victoria Park doesn't say, I'm not saying it's possible, but doesn't say have a cafe. But there may be a need, it may be good for a hub, so we may do that. It may start to attract more events into it and stuff like that. So it's kind of, it's the start of a process to identify it as a important key hub for the town that is Langdon.
If I could just follow up, Chair. So at the moment where it has a designation as a standard park or open space, is that to say that a cafe, for example, can't go on there under its current designation? And we're not saying that there will be one in Victoria Park, but it opens up the possibility to further development like that.
So you can stick a cafe on any park or any open space, that's fine. It's normally a town park gets designated under the kind of planning acts. So when you create certain, I'm not clued up on my full planning legislation, but when you create certain housing estates and stuff like that, you end up normally writing that in and it becomes up, and there's a certain specification of it's so many thousand population per blah 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 per bits, so that gets in there. It's just where Langdon for some reason has just missed that out, so we're not kind of doing it through a formal planning perspective, but we're doing it through that we recognise it as a town park, so it's one of our key kind of flagship parks, so to speak, so it's one of those ones that stand out.
Before I take the next question,
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, I was also going to build on from what Josh was saying there. I think the other thing we would expect from a town park, what Josh was saying there, is as and when, if and when applications for 106 seal or anything that's coming in the area, having the town park there acts as the beacon for the opportunities that they may bring. We are certainly looking, for instance, at play designation, and as we look at the town parks, we have a certain expectation around what they will deliver in relation to the size and the scope of play, the disability opportunities, etc., that we wouldn't do otherwise. So it provides a microscope for us in relation to what our expectations are for those parks also.
Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Chairman. I think for my part, to Councillor Wingfield's point about what it gives you most importantly is it gives you parity with the other parks. When we talk about opportunities, I'm not necessarily seeing somebody wheeling a caravan to have a coffee shop in there, but I do think more about the work that we do in Northlands with Active Basildon, with ATF, and the opportunities for just how changing the narrative of a park can actually change how people use it. If you want a park to be safe, use it, get in there, because there's nothing more uncool than Nan doing yoga in a lycra on a Friday and you're in there bumming around with all your mates. That's what my ambition for the park is. Grant mentioned 106 money, and actually there was a pot with 106 money, and we've put it to very, very good use. We've recently been doing a massive clear through, and I know some people have called me a tree Nazi as a result of that, but it is important. One of the things that we've fed back, and we do spend a lot of time through the park, one of the things we've had people feed back to us is that it doesn't feel particularly safe. It doesn't feel as good as all of the other town parks across the borough. It doesn't even feel as good as some of the open spaces. And I think that's typical. Kevin will say the same thing. We're both Langdon councillors, we're both Langdon residents. August 1944, a B-2 bomber came in one way, and in the early 50s, compulsory purchase came the other way, and Langdon's never been we've always been on a back foot ever since. We've never had a town park. Other 4 have got a town park. So I think this is an opportunity to level up Langdon in a different way. We've cleared through the visuals. Josh has been over there. We've been talking about it for several months. He's been over there the last few weeks, and the difference is incredible. I've been over there twice last week just talking to people that are out walking dogs or playing with their children in the parks, and they already see a difference. It feels safer. There's more visibility through the park and more possibility to do stuff. So I think when it comes to that, my hope would be that we can recreate some of the great work that we do in some of our other parks. We've got, we don't have an awful lot of engagement, and that's because we've never treated it properly. We've just not done that. Northlands Park, Wickford Memorial Park, all of our town parks have got really active friends-off groups, really active activity groups that are there all the time. There's always something going on. We don't have a fishing lake, we have a bit of a pond or a ditch or whatever you want to call it. But I think this is really, really important for Langdon. And that's, I think, all I want to say on Victoria Park. I think the other aspect is I'm really, really, really pleased with the work that Josh has done on this, and I think this is a sort of a layered document that sits with the draft biodiversity action plan that I think we brought to you the last time. I think it's really, really, really important. Again, it puts to work a little bit of credibility for some of those groups. If you look at most of these places, we've got very, very active and engaged volunteer groups who are doing a lot of work with us and really do care about this. It changes the classification, it changes how we as a council think about it. There's an education aspect there for us as well, an opportunity for us through comms to talk to people in a different way about how we use our open spaces and, more importantly, how we protect them. I think if anybody gets the opportunity to go to Nicholas Churchill's, get up there. We've put up new signs today, which are habitat boards and all sorts of stuff that we've been working on for a number of months. I know for a fact that the congregation, many of whom are in their 70s and 80s, who have never not been Langdoners, are seeing the difference there and appreciate the fact that actually they've got a greater sense of space. We've put in some quite formal paths, so you're no longer up to your knees in mud when you're out walking your dog or out with your children, and I think having a designation just gives it a little bit more clout, and it also means that we can maybe approach it in a slightly different way. So that's it from me. Thank you.
No, great news, and I look forward to visiting the new Victoria Nature Park very, very soon. Okay, so hold on a second there. Councillor Allen.
Yeah, some time ago when I was doing something about planning, there was a concern that every house, every home should be within a certain distance of an open space. And I noticed in your map there, it's sort of places where the parks or open spaces are quite dense there, and other places where there doesn't seem to be much. And like, for example, up at Oak Hill Road, someone's started a dog walking area because there isn't anywhere nearby to walk their dog in. So that's how that's come to be. So I just wondered if you're examining like estates or housing developments which don't have an open space reasonably close to them. And I think the criticism actually was that Billericay didn't and Wickford didn't have, but the Buzzard and Newtown had quite a number of open spaces because it was like in the background there it was development for new towns, and it was sort of that was considered at that time. And I just wondered whether in all your looking designations, whether you're looking at areas where it's a long way to go, or relatively long way I suppose, to an open space. So you need to create an open space or designation of open space. There's a facility for everyone. Bit long.
Yeah, so my map was a bit biased because that's just me and my biodiversity projects. I'll be honest, I haven't got a map with all the parks on. So there is quite a few there's a lot of parks dotted around all over the place, and you can see that in your in the add-on as well. It tells you all the wards that have the parks in there. Obviously, we can't create more green spaces, so a lot of these spaces are already ones that we've had, and we've actually been managing them like nature reserves or whatever before. So we've actually now saying, look, we've been doing the work, there's no change here, but we want to give it a proper designation. But obviously that's something that the planners will have to look at when they start building in more housing and stuff, is how many green spaces there are. Because as a parks team, we just manage the space, we don't really create extra ones, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was going to say, so
just follow on and then...
Apologies, sorry, we sat behind each other. Of course, there is regular engagement with the service in relation to planning on this. So as we, as an organisation, progress any discussions around the local plan, of course, I can confirm that the Parks and Countryside team are very much engaged in all of those discussions as well, as to ensure we continue to provide access to green spaces moving forward.
Yeah, I was thinking of like where there isn't much in the urban area, you could sort of create some open space within the green belt that's around the towns.
I think, Councillor, apologies for, I'm going to jump on this item as well, because I think you haven't heard my voice for 5 minutes. So I think that when we talked around the grounds maintenance specification, we've talked about the importance of biodiversity and the commitments the council's made to biodiversity, and making sure that's reflected within our grounds maintenance service moving forward. So that's something which we picked up as something which has changed since the last time we let our grounds maintenance contract, which obviously covers a larger part of the ground, and then the contribution that some of our other spaces might be able to make towards the great work that Josh and the team have put in place. So that's one of the reasons why we touched on biodiversity in the previous item, was to make sure that all those things join together.
Councillor Henry. Oh, no, okay, yeah, fine. Mr Wood.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify, are you actually looking at all open spaces throughout the borough? And if you are, is there going to be community engagement with surrounding properties as to what may be the best use of that, or what people would like to see?
So if there is anything going on in our parks or our green spaces, so like we've got our play strategy, we always go out and consult and talk about what's going on in our parks and green spaces. When it comes to in forms of designating larger areas, these are more separate from our parks and more of our countryside sites, so they're more rural. So most of these are historic that have been managed this way or set up this way, and we've been doing it. It's just putting that formal designation in, so it's a bit of recognition for Basden that actually one minute we've only got 3 nature reserves, the next thing I'm adding 8 on, we've actually been managing 12 and not been noticing. So it kind of shows residents where they could go into their green spaces and more places for them to explore.
Lovely stuff. Mine's a kind of technical question. By creating these nature reserves, are we not reducing the land supply that we have for building homes in the borough?
So this is going to be kind of a little bit by this round. At the moment, we've kind of got a housing crisis, a health crisis, we've got a farming crisis, we've got loads of crises going on. And the key thing to that is we've got a nature crisis. And if we sort the nature crisis out, we will then be able to start sorting the other bits and pieces out. So it is important that we are designating these areas and making sure we have them. But we have been working with planning. We've not just gone and said, right, we're going to designate this. We've said to planning, right, we're looking at putting in a designation for a nature reserve here. How are you happy with this? And they've agreed, because obviously, again, it's historic. So the land's Basildon's, it's always been Basildon, it's been managed as a countryside site. And as legislation's changed and it gets more protection on these sites, it's going to be harder to develop them. But for us, it's also an opportunity, because if we've now got, say, a nature reserve and we've got to develop a building next to it, we can then try and say, right, we want more funds to improve this, and we can actually enhance our green spaces from it.
Councillor Henry.
You ask about the classification of these and whether or not we're taking them out of the housing land supply, and I would very hand on heart proudly say, yes, we bloody are. and very happy to. And if you look at actually the list of the ones that we're designating, you couldn't build on them anyway. You just couldn't. If you look at Beauchamp's Meadow and Giddings Copse, you've got enormous great pylons that run right through the field that it is. You couldn't do a thing there. You can't build on a slope that's like that. It's St Nicholas Church. It's got a huge amount of history. There were buildings on there that the New Towns Act knocked most of them down after compulsory purchase. These are not places you could build on. They're not. We're not taking them out of anything. But if we were, I wouldn't be ashamed of saying that we were. And actually, you know, Josh has mentioned that there's a deficit in the provision of this open space. So while we're all sitting here working together, whoever's in May, we have the opportunity to make up that deficit while we're looking at our local plan and getting that, because that's still a mark on our local plan.
Indeed. And I dare say I don't think there's a political group here that's keen to build lots more homes. So I think unless there's any more statements, any more questions from anybody? Oh, yeah. Councillor Allen.
Just focusing on small patch, at the eastern far end of the golf course, there's a huge, quite big wilderness there, and it doesn't seem to have any public access or designation in this. Is that an area you looked into? The far eastern end of the golf course.
So is that going away from near the main towards Vange?
Yeah, so it's the Vange end, and below it there's the Vange Community Centre, but there's a huge area there, which is like quite a wilderness, which...
So that's Vange Hill Local Nature Reserve. That's one of the original designated nature reserves. So behind that is meadows. So they will feed into our local biodiversity action plan. So they are classed as an MG5 habitat. So they've got quite good species rich in there. So it may be a wilderness, but it is already been protected.
There doesn't seem to be any public access to it, really.
Take a weed whacker.
So if you want, to get into Vange Hill, we've got the community centre.
Well, I mean, going around the golf course and just get there and there's this wild wilderness area. I'm thinking, well, something could be beneficial to somebody.
Yeah, there's two ways in. You can come in off the golf course and come in, or you can go down the road from the community centre up the field through the field gate. There's a big sign that says Vange Hill Nature Reserve, and it's that large area of expanse in there.
Okay, so if there's no more comments or questions, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just a final comment, Councillor. So we've also worked with Trust Links over in that area. They've recently opened up their therapeutic garden in Vange Hill Drive. One of the key aims we wanted from that was for them to support the residents of Vange with setting up some work parties and friends groups around maintaining that site, and that's already started. So we've not only is it designated, but we've also got the good people of Vange out there starting to look after that site, like in other areas. So we're really pleased with that.
All right, lovely stuff. So yes, I think just concluding remarks here, basically, very, very exciting developments. Special thanks to council officers and also the cabinet member, Councillor Henry, for his work on this with council officers. A broadly positive result, and I think we need to secure our nature, our natural heritage for our children and our children's children. So this is great stuff, and I think more please, if anything. So with that, council officers obviously have made note of that and had the feedback. We'll move on to, I want to say it's our second to last. It is our second to last item on the agenda, and that would be the overview report for quarter 3. So I'll hand over to the relevant person for that.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to go through in any detail. I think really positive direction of travel. As you know, we've gone through the performance in most areas where we've got exceptions. Performance either greater than the targets or slightly below. They're detailed on the bottom of the report at the end of each section. So I think probably at this time it's open to members' questions, really, if there's anything specific. It's quite a lengthy report to sort of go through in detail at 10 o'clock at night. Yeah, anything that you want to...
bedtime.
Right. Yes, I suppose. Right. So just to advise our group, the Scrutiny Committee, the work programme, which is just afterwards, will be, I would imagine, quite a short item. So I would like to do this in a relatively timely manner, but I do want to still make sure we scrutinise this reasonably well. So if people have just perhaps a one-shot question on a particular topic, maybe we can do it that way. But I'll start off with Councillor Allen.
I think on page 71, there's a number of items quoted as a percentage, which I think is a bit meaningless, really. So you've got on the first line, number of homeless applications accepted, and you've got, for December 23, you've got 64. But then after that, percentage of all cases closed for which homelessness was prevented. Well, that would make more sense if that was a number. You know, how many cases were closed which were prevented? And the same with the percentage, all cases closed. How many cases were closed, were relieved? You know, put in actual numbers of cases rather than a percentage, because you say a percentage of what, really? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We can certainly add that. I see the exact point that you are making, and we can certainly do that for future reports, so you've got a number in there.
Councillor McGeorge.
Thank you. Page 74, so this is to do with the housing strategy. It's got percentage of appointment, percentage repairs where an appointment was kept. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still in the 90s, but it seems to have gone down the last 3 quarters. Do we know if that's like the residents are sort of not in when the repair teams get there, or if it's the repair teams that are not turning up, or do we know why that's dropping?
It's a combination of both of those. There was a dip in performance towards the end of that quarter, so Christmas time through sickness, etc. But there was also some difficulty getting into some properties for whatever reason in December. People are busy, etc. So it was a mixture of both, but very hopeful. And obviously I've already seen the January statistics, which are looking more favourable. So, yeah.
Mr. Wood.
Yeah, hello. Regarding page 75, regarding the Social Housing Decarb Fund, I've noticed a few void properties that I've been looking at lately haven't appeared to have loft insulation fitted, and obviously with fuel poverty and all these new gadgets that are going into properties, I wonder if that's something that should be considered, because I didn't see it on the void standard list.
Thank you, Mr. Woods. So we have put in a bid and was successful. So we've got about £4.5 million to spend on energy efficiency measures to our homes. And that the contract has just been signed. That work primarily is going to start on the safe and sound estates. And the reason for doing that is that obviously there's economies of scale in working across estates rather than just sending teams to void properties. But absolutely, over a period of time, we would want all of our stock to have benefited from those measures, absolutely. So rather than do it piecemeal when we get void properties, they're working across estates. You think it would make sense perhaps while the property's empty, but it's not quite as easy to move entire teams over to do that. So.
Councillor McGeorge.
Thank you. Page 65, we've got the missed collections reported. It starts off sort of 1,500, 2,500, and then December jumped to 5,500. Do we know what not being picked up? Is it specifically the sacks or why?
As I said to you, a new system has been introduced. So when you are, sorry, which one were we on?
Is it the top one?
The miscollections.
Yeah.
So miscollections. Now you would report a miscollection from your house previously. Now you're saying miscollection of which container. So where we may have missed an entire property, that could be 5 reports. So that tells us what we didn't have is the intelligence before as to what crew may have missed. Now we know exactly which crews are missing and how, and then we're able to send them back to go and collect theirs. So that's why it's shot up.
Sorry, that should sort of level itself out. It might stay slightly high because it is the 4 or 5 containers, but it will.
And multiple reports are also in there. So where somebody's reported it 6 times, that is also being picked up 6 times. Going forward, you will see those sliding down quite quickly, and they are going down currently.
I think that's the point as well, that they are going down week by week, and we keep a close eye on them. The only time they went up was the first week the garden waste was back because the bins were frozen. So there was minus temperatures, so the garden waste got frozen in the bottom of some of the bins. We got a load more reports on garden waste, but across the board, we're way down from 0.2858% of all collections last week to 0.2233% this week. So we're talking about small percentages, but still, like I said earlier, it's important about how we get that right most of the time and then get it resolved if it is reported to us. So, yeah, numbers are in the right direction.
Any more for any more? Okay, all right. Okay, I think then on this we're basically done. Just a little reflection there on the homelessness. It's heartening to see that our council's been so proactive in dealing with that and actually providing allowing for so much provision to take place to help our homeless population. So that's good news there. And I'm glad to see also that we are on top of housing and taking a responsible approach to it. So thanks to council officers for all the hard work they're doing there. Okay, so that was for noting. Okay, so let's move on to the work programme, the final section. We did that last one in 10 minutes, everybody. Well done. That's an efficient discussion. So I'll hand over now to the relevant person.
Thank you, Chair. So this report provides members with an opportunity to consider and identify items for the committee's work programme for the remainder of the municipal year. Refer members to pages 84 and 85, which sets out the items which are coming to forthcoming meetings. You've already been informed that we're putting an additional meeting at the 28th of February, which is on there.
Sorry, everybody.
So we're just asking the committee to note and endorse the items currently identified, if there was anything else they wanted to look at, and also note the Cabinet Forward Plan in Enclosure 1. Thank you, Chair.
So before we note this, does anyone have any reflections or comments? All right, lovely stuff. So in that case, just raising of hands, presumably?
No, it's just for noting.
Okay, it's literally just for noting. So you are now noted, and that's the last thing. Yep. Lovely stuff. All right, everybody. So thank you very much for today's attendance. Thank you very much to our officers as well for their tireless, late working. We got our value for money out of you today, that's for sure. And thank you for all the committee members for attending us, and thank you for our advisory members as well for your input. It's all been very useful. It will all be fed back, and here's to a better council and better decisions. Thank you very much, and have a good evening.